What a lovely place this is. Everyone seems to be having a great time, they said warmly, their demeanor a sharp contrast to my husband's. Mom, Dad, thanks for coming. Rosalie's happy you're here. Today's on me, my husband said casually, even though he planned to eat for free. He lied effortlessly, not just to his parents but probably to his brother and other relatives too. He's lied before, but he's so confident he won't get caught because everyone sees him as the perfect son. Rosalie's really been excelling. She took over the restaurant from her late parents and has been running it impressively. It wasn't easy at first, but she turned things around. She's my pride and joy, he boasted to his parents, deliberately praising me, his pride and joy, to deceive them. But in reality, he barely sees me as more than a maid. As he spoke, my in-laws turned to me, nodding in approval. They've always recognized my efforts since the beginning of our marriage. Their kindness shone through their eyes. Meanwhile, my husband subtly changed his expression, silently warning me to keep quiet. Rosalie's been working hard, and Kyle's doing well too. Everything's going smoothly at Brown Trading, right? Your salary's been increasing, hasn't it? They asked. Yeah, that's correct. I'm respected at Brown Trading, and my boss has high hopes for me. I aim to lead my team through actions and results, and I'll keep up the good work, my husband replied confidently. That's our son, all right. Spending $155,000 like that isn't something just anyone can do, his parents remarked proudly, but my husband's expression darkened slightly at that moment. Today, we have 15 relatives dining with us, including my in-laws and brother-in-law's family. It's $11,000 per person, totaling $115,000. I calculated silently, knowing my husband was trying to get it all for free, unaware of the cost. When he realized it was pricier than he thought, he quickly regained composure to avoid exposing his lie. This one's on me, everyone. It's the least I can do. I just got my bonus, so no worries at all. Leave it to me, he declared, puffing up his chest as the in-laws chuckled softly. Checking the time, it was 6:00 p.m., so I guided my husband and in-laws to their reserved seats. The other relatives followed suit. Just as they were settling in, my husband shot me a creepy grin. An hour later, I approached their table in the banquet room. They were enjoying themselves, oblivious to the surroundings. Feel free to order more, everyone. It boosts restaurant sales, and Rosalie will be delighted, so go ahead, my husband encouraged, each word accompanied by a flurry of extra orders. With the banquet meals and additional orders, the bill had surpassed $20,000. Everyone assumed my husband, a corporate elite with a hefty income, was treating them. While some hesitated, my husband seemed to push them to order more. That's when I decided to set the record straight, loud enough for all to hear. Since it's Kyle's treat, I had $60,000 transferred yesterday, so everyone, please enjoy yourselves without holding back, I announced, causing a buzz of surprise among the relatives. $60,000. Classic Kyle, were words of almost admiration that flew around. While the relatives reacted like this, my husband wore a bewildered look, clueless about what was going on. I didn't miss his expression and added a line to start my counterattack. Well, the $60,000 isn't for the food. It's for alimony, actually, I stated, causing puzzled looks among the buzzing relatives. Alimony, Kyle? What's this about alimony? One of them asked. No, I don't know about any alimony. Sometimes Rosalie jokes around, so please don't mind her. Come on, Rosalie, don't upset everyone with jokes like that. My husband tried to brush it off, but he was clearly the most troubled. His face was smiling, but his eyes told a different story. The way he looked at me was terrifying. But it wasn't done. Kyle, you're the one making uncomfortable jokes here. I think it's time the family knew that, right? I said firmly, handing him a piece of paper and a bank book. As he examined them closely, his face turned pale. The alimony is for cheating. Kyle has been unfaithful. He's not the person you all think he is. He can lie and deceive people without a second thought, I revealed. The atmosphere in the banquet room shifted abruptly. The once lively chatter ceased, replaced by an eerie silence. The document I handed to my husband was the original alimony claim, and the bank book showed a record of a $60,000 transfer. Everyone's attention was fixed on my husband and me, and silence lingered for a few seconds. But it was my husband who broke it. How funny, Rosalie. That's quite something. It looks just like a real statement in a bank book, but really, this is going too far. There's no way I would cheat. It seemed like he had shifted back to his usual confident demeanor. But that confidence quickly faded, and I couldn't help but smile. What are you talking about, Kyle? You're the one who's gone too far. Not only cheating but also trying to bully me into eating for free, lying to all the relatives that it's your treat. That's too much of a joke. Correct yourself quickly, everyone. Don't take Rosalie's words to heart. Without needing to say anything, the relatives seemed unable to believe it outright, and no one spoke up. I didn't react to my husband's words either, just watching his actions closely. Gradually, he started to panic. That's when he tried to get his parents on his side. Dad, Mom, tell her to stop these senseless jokes at a time like this. Ah yes, everyone calm down and listen to me, his dad began. Rosalie isn't making any senseless jokes. She's just stating the facts. It's undeniable that Kyle has been unfaithful, and she's not threatening Rosie. He's trying to get today's meal for free too. What are you two even saying? Are you taking what Rosie said seriously? That's not funny at all, my husband protested, but his parents seemed convinced. The only thing that's not funny is this situation. We've come here knowing everything to confront you, I declared. Yes, I had already confessed everything to my in-laws, revealing how my husband uses his outward kindness to play the dutiful son while behind the scenes, he's up to no good. Even as we waited for our reservation time, he tried to deceive his parents, but they saw through his lies. Enough. I would never deceive everyone. You're ruining the good mood we had, Rosalie. What are you going to do about this? My disclosure and having the in-laws on my side were completely unexpected for him. He visibly started to lose his composure, standing up and glaring at me intensely, as if he might lunge at me any moment. Come on, brother, calm down. Let's sit down and talk this over calmly. Nicholas, you believe me, right? Interjected his brother, my brother-in-law Nicholas, cutting through my husband's angry shouts. Nicholas, busy with his own job, was attending today with his wife Yasmin. I knew Nicholas and my husband had been close since before I started dating him, and he is as gentle and consistently smiling as the in-laws. However, Nicholas's next action would utterly defeat my husband. He pulled a thick envelope out of his bag and handed it to my husband, saying, "You believe me, right, brother?" "How can I believe you when you've been cheating with my wife, Nicholas?" "You what?" My husband's accusation hung heavy in the air as Nicholas handed over the envelope. Inside was a report on the infidelity investigation. It turns out my husband had been cheating with Nicholas's wife, Yasmin. Just before my father-in-law had said, "We've come here knowing everything," and by we, he meant the brother-in-law's family too. And it turns out, I learned about my husband's infidelity thanks to Nicholas. Hesitantly, my husband checked the contents of the envelope, turning pale as a ghost. Inside were numerous photos of him cheating with Yasmin, pictures of them dining at a fancy restaurant, looking into each other's eyes. There were photos of them being cozy in a car and others of them embracing and kissing in front of a hotel. There's no way he could just say they were just going out. It was indeed a decisive moment, a hellish scene. "Is this a joke? Unbelievable, Kyle did this," were the whispers I heard. The relatives around us were in turmoil, and the banquet hall buzzed in a whole different way. For my husband, it couldn't have gotten any worse. He was completely flustered now. No, wait. This investigation report is fake. The photos must be doctored because I haven't cheated with Yasmin. We didn't cheat, right? He pleaded, trying to enlist Yasmin's support in his last-ditch effort. Immediately after Yasmin, now the center of attention, bowed deeply to the floor in full prostration. "Everyone, I am terribly sorry. I have had an affair with Kyle." Yasmin's confession stunned the room. My husband in particular was visibly shaken. He hadn't anticipated Yasmin fully admitting to the affair. He had been insisting the alimony bill and the bank book were fake, only thinking of himself and taking me for granted. He couldn't have imagined this. Yasmin's earnest apology captivated not only my husband but also the rest of the banquet hall. But it wasn't just my husband who was affected. All the relatives were stunned by Yasmin's admission. As her forehead remained on the floor, she slowly began to speak. It really was just a fling. Nicholas is a wonderful husband, but, well, it lacked excitement, you might say. Just doing housework and waiting at home for Nicholas to return, I started to feel like my life would forever be the same. And suddenly, I got bored. When I approached Kyle, he was happy to go along. Everyone listened in silence to Yasmin's voice, mixed with regret and reflection. As she raised her head and revealed more truths, I tried to end it immediately, knowing it was wrong. But Kyle got serious about it. He threatened to expose everything if I tried to break it off. I know it sounds like an excuse now, but I am truly sorry. Yasmin's confession left the relatives staring in disbelief at such a lack of morals. Yasmin had initiated the affair, and though she was threatened, it's hard to completely sympathize with her. But she came here today to admit her mistakes and apologize, which is somewhat redeemable. However, my husband tried to escape by lying and making excuses, unaware that he was just tightening the noose around his own neck. He really is a fool, brother. It's all useless. I, Rosalie, and our parents know everything. I'm going to demand alimony from you, and you're going to pay Nicholas. When did you realize? You didn't even do an investigation. You must have been sure, right? Yes, I heard it from someone I truly despise, you brother. Right, Rosalie? That's right. It wasn't just Yasmin. He had his hands on other women too. What, Rosalie? How much do you know? Just give me a break already. Too bad, Kyle. I know everything, and if anyone should be asking for mercy, it's us. I never thought you'd even make a move on an employee at a restaurant. I continued, then called a woman into the banquet hall. This woman was the waitress who had been talking with the in-laws, Nicholas, Yasmin, and several other relatives while they waited for their reservation time. Turns out, while having an affair with Yasmin, my husband had also been making advances towards this waitress. She had also attended the same school with me back in our student days. Before even consulting Rosalie, who was the restaurant owner, she came to me. Kyle had threatened to destroy your family if you spilled the beans to Rosalie. You're really horrible. I've said it before, but we know everything, brother. All you can do now is admit your guilt and apologize, just like Yasmin did. Kyle, let me ask you something. Why would you deceive Rosalie to carry on with your affairs? From what we can see, Rosalie has been nothing but supportive. She's been managing the restaurant that she inherited from her parents and taking care of home as well. What does she ever do to you? Under the cold stares, my husband flinched at his father-in-law's question. I thought there was no valid excuse for infidelity, but if I had been unconsciously pushing him into a corner, I wanted to reflect on myself too. Awaiting his response, what he said next was shocking. I married Rosalie because I felt sorry for her. Before our marriage, she was struggling to turn the restaurant around with both parents gone. I was the only one she could rely on. I couldn't live without that feeling of superiority. And then what? Rosalie managed to turn it around. The restaurant became popular, and suddenly I found it boring. That's why I thought of dumping her, my husband said, smirking as if he had nothing to lose. Despite already knowing his true nature, a deep disgust welled up from within. It seemed he viewed everyone but himself as mere tools. The cold stares from the relatives quickly turned to pity. A feeling of superiority felt good, got bored, and decided to dump her. Kyle, do you realize what you're saying? You're successful in your big company because Rosalie supported you. Don't you have any gratitude? No, you're wrong. I succeeded because of my own skills. Besides, isn't it normal for a wife to support her husband? Does a mother serve a father expecting gratitude? No, right? Rosalie served me because she loved me. It's presumptuous to expect gratitude for that, my husband argued. Enough, Kyle. I find you repulsive. We are cutting ties with you, but we will watch you until you take responsibility. Be prepared. Fine, cut ties or whatever. I have a stable job. I can live on my own. In fact, it's a relief, right, Rosalie? You can enjoy life more without me around. I'll pay whatever alimony or anything else, so don't worry. My husband laughed, seemingly without a care. Looking at him, I thought again, he doesn't understand anything, knows nothing at all. Really? You can pay alimony? Aren't you about to be sued by your company, Kyle? A lawsuit for damages isn't cheap, you know, I retorted. What? The company's suing me? That's ridiculous. You were bragging today, weren't you, that you're respected at Brown Trading, that your boss has high expectations, that you lead your subordinates with actions and results. But it was all lies. In reality, you've been threatening your subordinates and embezzling company money. What? I would never do something like that. I rose through the ranks on my own merit. Don't talk nonsense when you know nothing, my husband protested. What you don't know, Kyle, is that all the subordinates you threatened have come forward. The company has been aware of the issue for a while. But you don't have to believe me, I'm just stating facts. It'll be interesting to see how far you fall. I explained to him in a calm tone, trying to make him understand. And the color drained from his face. If he really had no idea, he could have laughed it off. But the truth is, he was misbehaving at work too, so denying it was impossible. Seeing the realization dawn on him, he quickly turned pleading. Rosalie, you're right. I knew nothing. I'd only said those things because I wanted to leave. Please continue to support me if we divorce now. I stopped him right there. Don't say anything more. The relatives are about to tear you apart, Kyle. It's too late for anything now, and it doesn't matter whether you knew or didn't know. No one will help you, and you'll get your wish to live alone. Oh, and by the way, make sure you pay for today's bill. It was your treat, wasn't it? The moment I said this, Kyle collapsed to his knees. No one reached out to help him. Today, after threatening me, deceiving the relatives to get a free meal, he finds himself unable to get off scot-free. Afterwards, I filed for divorce, and Kyle was sued by his company. Kyle ended up incurring a significant amount of debt. The reason Kyle had no savings despite dealing with Brown Trading was that he was footing the bill for entertainment expenses with the employees. However, this entertainment was merely a pretext. In reality, Kyle was just squandering money at nightclubs. Given that Kyle, who had a high-paying job, had no savings, it's clear he had been recklessly spending his money. This was entirely Kyle's own doing, so he should have dealt with it himself. But instead, he asked for help from his in-laws and Nicholas's family. Of course, no one was willing to help. Kyle had defiantly claimed he could live on his own and even laughed off being disowned. So it's no surprise, yet Kyle continued his futile attempts and kept sending messages to my smartphone incessantly. I was wrong. I shouldn't have cheated. I regret it. Please help me. The messages clearly showed he was desperate, but it felt like just another act. Given his history of deceit and manipulation, it's hard to believe him still. I have not blocked Kyle's contact. I've left it unblocked so that I can receive his messages. I want to see what becomes of a person who has only thought of himself and demeaned others around him. It's uncertain what will happen to Kyle now that he has hit rock bottom. One thing I do know is that unless Kyle truly repents and changes himself, he will not be able to climb out of this pit. That much I am sure of. Rosalie, I am truly sorry for what my brother has done. It's irreparable. Nicholas apologized to me after divorcing Yasmin. The in-laws who came with him also deeply bowed their heads. I am a failure as a parent. I can't believe I didn't see my son's true nature sooner. If only I had realized earlier, this wouldn't have happened. Kyle took advantage of your kindness, Rosalie, and did whatever he wanted. It was our responsibility to stop him. You all don't need to apologize. If anything, I am grateful. I had no one else to rely on, no parents or relatives. So thank you for always being on my side. From the beginning of our marriage, the in-laws and Nicholas have been my allies. That I was able to turn around the inherited restaurant was possible only with their support. They are genuinely kind and always smiling. They showed such fury on my behalf that was incredibly comforting to me, who is utterly alone. I will never forget this warmth for as long as I live.
I remember that day clearly. It was a sunny Tuesday when I was about to meet Mark's parents for the first time. I was nervous but excited. Mark and I had been dating for 2 years, and he had finally popped the question. I had heard a lot about his parents, but we'd never met. Mark had always described his parents as traditional and a bit old-fashioned. I guess I didn't realize what that meant until I met them. We decided to meet at a local cafe. I arrived first, wearing my favorite blue dress, hoping to make a good impression. Mark arrived with his parents. His mom, Mrs. Thompson, wore a stern look and his dad, Mr. Thompson, seemed uninterested in everything around him. Kate, these are my parents, John and Margaret Thompson, Mark introduced us. Nice to meet you, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, I said with a smile. Likewise, Mrs. Thompson replied, scanning me from head to toe. Mark tells us you're a lawyer. Where do you work? I was taken aback by her directness but managed to reply, at Johnson and Partners, downtown. And your salary? Must be good, being a lawyer and all, Mr. Thompson chimed in, his tone blunt. I hesitated, unsure how to respond. It's adequate for my needs, I said, trying to keep the conversation light. Mrs. Thompson raised an eyebrow. And where do you plan to live after the wedding? I glanced at Mark, hoping he'd step in, but he just shrugged. We're still discussing that, I said. And your parents, what do they do? Mr. Thompson asked, his voice almost demanding. They run a small business, I replied, growing uncomfortable with the interrogation. Mrs. Thompson snorted. Small business, huh? Let's hope they can contribute decently to the wedding. I felt a knot in my stomach. Mark noticed my discomfort but said nothing. As we ordered, Mrs. Thompson kept making side comments about the prices, and Mr. Thompson kept nodding in agreement. The whole meeting felt more like a business transaction than a family gathering. I remember thinking, is this what my future looks like? I tried to shrug off the feeling, telling myself it was just first meeting jitters. But deep down, I knew this was a red flag I couldn't ignore. It didn't take long after that first meeting for Mark's parents to become a constant, unsettling presence in my life. Their calls would come at any hour, disrupting my daily routine. Each ring of the phone started to feel like an intrusion. One evening, just as I was about to leave my office, my phone buzzed. It was Mrs. Thompson. "Kate, dear, I need you to look over some legal papers for us." "It's just a small favor," she said, her voice laced with expectation. I sighed, feeling the weight of her request. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm actually just heading out from work. Can it wait?" "Oh, it's just a quick look." "You can do it, can't you? For family," she pressed. I agreed reluctantly, knowing this was becoming a pattern. The next day, Mr. Thompson called. "Kate, I need help with setting up a new TV. Mark's busy, can you swing by?" Their requests were becoming more frequent and more demanding. I tried talking to Mark about it. "Mark, your parents are calling me all the time. For legal advice, for tech support, for everything," I said, hoping he'd understand. "They're just being friendly, Kate." "They're like that with everyone," Mark replied casually, brushing off my concerns. "But it's too much. They're calling me at work, at odd hours." "I'm feeling overwhelmed," I insisted. "Come on, Kate. They're harmless. Just trying to bond with you," he said, not meeting my eyes. I felt a mix of frustration and helplessness. It was as if Mark was completely blind to his parents' overbearing behavior. One evening, as we were having dinner at my place, the phone rang. It was Mrs. Thompson, again. "Kate, can you come over tomorrow? I need some advice on redecorating the living room." "You have such good taste," she said. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm not really an interior designer." I started, but she cut me off. "But you have such a lovely home. I insist." "We'll have lunch," she said, making it sound more like a command than a request. I hung up, feeling trapped. Mark just shrugged and said, "See? They really like you." But to me, it felt more like they were taking advantage of me, and Mark's indifference was only making it worse. I started to wonder if this was what my future with Mark would be like, constantly being at the beck and call of his parents, with no support from him. It was a Friday evening when Mark suggested we go out for dinner with his parents. He chose a fancy restaurant downtown, the kind where you'd think twice before checking the prices on the menu. I had a hunch it wouldn't be a casual, relaxing dinner, and boy, was I right. We arrived at the restaurant, and the Thompsons were already there, scanning the menu. Mrs. Thompson's eyes lit up when she saw the lobster and steak options. "Kate, you simply must try the lobster here. It's divine!" Mrs. Thompson exclaimed, her voice dripping with enthusiasm. I glanced at the menu and saw the price. It was more than I wanted to spend, but before I could respond, Mr. Thompson chimed in. "Mark told us you're doing well at your firm. Surely, a successful lawyer like you can afford a little splurge now and then," he said, his tone a bit too pointed. Feeling cornered, I smiled weakly and said, "Actually, I was thinking of something lighter, maybe a salad." Mrs. Thompson looked at me as if I had suggested something outrageous. "A salad? Nonsense, you're at one of the best restaurants in town. You must try their specialties." I felt uncomfortable, but decided not to argue. I didn't want to cause a scene. As we were eating, the conversation revolved around Mark and his achievements, with his parents occasionally throwing in a question or two about my work, but not really listening to my answers. Then came the moment of truth, the bill. Mr. Thompson patted his pockets and then looked at his wife with a feigned expression of surprise. "Oh dear, I think I left my wallet at home," he said, his voice a little too calm for someone who'd just dined lavishly on someone else's dime. Mrs. Thompson joined in the charade. "John, how could you be so forgetful? I don't have mine either." I looked at Mark, expecting him to step in, but he just shrugged and mumbled, "I guess I forgot my card too." I couldn't believe it. Were they serious? It was clear this wasn't just forgetfulness. It felt more like a setup. With a sinking feeling, I pulled out my card and handed it to the waiter. Mrs. Thompson smiled sweetly at me. "Thank you, dear. You're such a lifesaver." As we left the restaurant, I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. Was I just a walking wallet to them? And why didn't Mark say anything? With the wedding drawing nearer, it became increasingly clear that it was time for our parents to meet. Given all my experiences with Mark's parents, I was bracing myself for this encounter. I remember pacing in my living room, phone in hand, rehearsing how I'd break the news to my parents. I finally mustered the courage and called them. "Hey, Mom, Dad, I think it's time you met Mark's parents," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, Kate, we've been so excited about this. When can we meet them?" Mom's voice was a mix of enthusiasm and curiosity. I took a deep breath before adding a cautious note. "Just to give you a heads up, they're a bit, well, intense." Dad's voice came through with a chuckle. "Kate, we've seen all sorts in our days. Don't you worry, we'll manage." His confidence was comforting, but I couldn't shake off my apprehensions. We decided the Grandview Hotel, known for its pleasant ambience and beautiful surroundings. It was a familiar place to me, which I hoped would provide a distraction if things got too intense. The next day, I mentioned the plan to Mark over breakfast. "So, we're meeting at the Grandview Hotel this Saturday. I think it'll be nice for our parents to meet in a neutral, relaxed setting." Mark nodded, absorbed in his phone. "Sure, sounds good. I'll let my folks know." I spent the next few days in a whirlwind of preparation. I wanted to ensure that everything was perfect, hoping it would help keep the peace. As the day grew closer, my nerves began to fray. I found myself obsessing over every little detail, from what I would wear to how I would steer the conversation away from any potentially sensitive topics. On the eve of the meeting, I lay awake, scenarios running through my head. What if Mark's parents said something offensive? What if my parents didn't like them? What if the whole lunch turned into a disaster? The morning of the meeting, I was a bundle of nerves. I chose a simple but elegant dress, hoping to strike the right balance between casual and formal. Mark, on the other hand, seemed completely unfazed by the significance of the day. "It's just lunch, Kate. Everything will be fine," he said nonchalantly as he got dressed. His calmness did little to soothe my anxiety. If anything, it made me feel more alone in my concerns. I wondered if he truly understood how his parents' behavior had been affecting me, or if he was just choosing to ignore it. As we drove to the hotel, I went over the plan in my head. Keep the conversation light, avoid controversial topics, and try to ensure everyone gets along. Simple, right? The Grandview Hotel looked stunning as always, its elegant facade basking in the afternoon sun. As Mark and I walked into the lobby, my stomach was doing somersaults. I spotted my parents first, sitting in the lounge area. They stood up as we approached, smiles on their faces. "Kate, dear, you look wonderful," my mom said, giving me a reassuring hug. Dad gave me a firm, supportive pat on the back. Mark's parents arrived shortly after. The air seemed to change as soon as they walked in. Mrs. Thompson's eyes scanned the lobby like she was assessing the value of every item. "Nice place you've chosen, Kate," Mr. Thompson commented dryly, as he shook hands with my parents. "We thought it'd be a lovely spot for everyone to get together," I replied, trying to sound cheerful. We moved to the dining area, and that's when things took an unexpected turn. A hotel employee approached us with an apologetic look. I'm so sorry, but we're a bit overbooked today. We only have a few single rooms and 2 triple rooms available, he explained. One of the triple rooms is our finest suite, with all amenities. The other is more basic and close to the road, so it can be a bit noisy, he added. Before I could say anything, Mrs. Thompson jumped in. Well, obviously, John, Mark, and I will take the suite. Kate, you can cover the cost, right? After all, you organized this meeting. I was taken aback by her audacity. Well, I was thinking my parents and I could take the suite, and... But Mrs. Thompson cut me off. Nonsense. We're the guests. And besides, you're the one with the big lawyer salary. My dad, trying to defuse the situation, suggested, why don't we discuss this over lunch and decide afterward? Lunch was a tense affair. Conversation was forced, and I noticed Mark's parents sizing up my folks, their comments edged with subtle digs. My parents, to their credit, kept their cool, responding with grace and humor. As we neared the end of the meal, the room topic resurfaced. Mrs. Thompson was adamant. We should get the suite. It's only proper. Kate can afford it. Mark, who had been quiet, finally spoke up. Mom's right. It's important they're comfortable. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was he really siding with them over this? My mom, ever the peacemaker, suggested, why don't we let the hotel decide? They can assign rooms based on availability. But Mrs. Thompson wouldn't have it. Kate said you have a small business. I think you're not used to luxury. The simplest room should suit you. It is just designed for people with small incomes. The tension was palpable. I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. This wasn't just about rooms, it was about respect, something Mark's parents seemed to have little of, especially for me and my family. As the tension in the hotel lobby mounted, my father, George, cleared his throat and stepped forward, commanding everyone's attention. There's something you all should know, he said, his voice calm and assertive. Mark, his parents, and I all looked at him, curious and a bit confused. This hotel, Dad continued, along with several others across the country, belongs to our family business. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Mrs. Thompson's mouth dropped open, and Mr. Thompson's eyes widened in shock. Mark turned to me, his face a mix of surprise and disbelief. You own this hotel? Mrs. Thompson finally managed to sputter out. Yes, and a few more, Dad replied casually. We've always preferred to keep a low profile. The hotel employee, recognizing my father, suddenly seemed very flustered. Mr. Williams, I apologize for the inconvenience earlier. I had no idea. Dad dismissed his concerns with a wave. It's fine. But we will be taking the suite, and Mark's family can have the other room. And there's no need for Kate to pay. Suddenly, Mrs. Thompson's demeanor shifted dramatically. She became excessively flattering, her tone oozing with a newfound affection. George, Linda, what a wonderful surprise. We had no idea. You must be so proud of your accomplishments. Mark, who had been silent until now, turned to me, an eager look in his eyes. Kate, this is incredible. We should move up our wedding date, don't you think? I looked around at their changed faces, the forced smiles, the sycophantic attitudes. It was all too much, too fake. I took a deep breath, my decision clear in my mind. Actually, Mark, there won't be a wedding. I'm calling off the engagement. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Mrs. Thompson's smile faltered, Mr. Thompson looked stunned, and Mark was speechless. I can't be a part of a family that only values people for their wealth and status, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. With those words, I turned and walked away, leaving behind the pretense, the expectations, and a future that no longer felt right for me. As I walked away from the hotel, my heart pounding and my mind racing, I heard Mark's footsteps hurrying after me. Kate, wait, please. Let's talk about this, he pleaded, his voice laced with desperation. I stopped and turned to face him, feeling a surge of determination. What is there to talk about, Mark? Your parents' behavior? Your indifference? Before Mark could reply, Mrs. Thompson stormed up to us, her face red with anger. Ungrateful girl. After all we've done for you, she spat out, her words laced with venom. I stared at her in disbelief. Done for me? You've done nothing but disrespect me and my family. Mrs. Thompson's tirade continued, her words becoming more hurtful. Stupid girl. You and your parents think you're better than us, don't you? Mark looked torn between us, his mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. It was then that my father, George, stepped in. His voice was calm but carried an authority that stopped Mrs. Thompson in her tracks. I think it's time for you to leave our hotel, he said firmly. Mrs. Thompson scoffed. We're not going anywhere. You can't make us. Dad turned to the hotel staff. Please escort Mr. and Mrs. Thompson out. They are no longer welcome here. The staff moved in, politely but firmly guiding Mark's parents away. Mrs. Thompson was still hurling insults over her shoulder as they left. Mark looked at me, a mix of confusion and regret in his eyes. Kate, I'm sorry, I didn't expect. But I cut him off. It's too late for sorry, Mark. Your silence said everything I needed to know. With those final words, I walked away from him, the sound of his mother's angry voice fading into the background. I felt a mix of sadness and relief wash over me. It hurt to end things with Mark, but I knew it was the right decision. As I drove home, the weight of the day's events began to sink in. It was the end of one chapter, but the beginning of another. A chapter where I stood up for myself and refused to settle for anything less than what I deserved. The days following the breakup were a whirlwind of emotions. I oscillated between relief, sadness, and a newfound sense of freedom. The decision to end my engagement with Mark, though painful, felt like the first step towards a future where I respected my own worth. One evening, as I sat on my porch, my mom called. Kate, how are you holding up, sweetheart? Her voice was full of concern. I took a deep breath, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. I'm doing okay, Mom. It's been hard, but I feel like it was the right decision. You're stronger than you realize, Kate. And we're so proud of you, she said warmly. I smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude for my supportive family. Thanks, Mom. I don't know what I'd do without you and Dad. There was a brief pause before she spoke again. You know, sometimes the end of one thing is just the start of something new. Something better. Her words struck a chord in me. You're right, Mom. This is a chance for a new beginning. In the days that followed, I threw myself into my work and spent time with friends who had been my pillars of strength. Their support was a constant reminder that I wasn't alone. One weekend, while having lunch with my best friend, Sarah, she said, You know, Kate, I think you did something many wouldn't have the courage to do. You stood up for yourself. I nodded, stirring my coffee. It was tough, but I realized I have to be true to myself. I can't be in a relationship where I'm not valued. Sarah smiled, raising her glass. To new beginnings and self-respect. May this be the start of something wonderful for you. I clinked my glass against hers, feeling a sense of optimism about the future. In the weeks that followed, I found a new sense of independence. I explored hobbies I'd put on the back burner and even started planning a solo trip, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the courage to try. Life after Mark was different, but it was empowering. I realized that being on my own wasn't something to fear, but an opportunity to discover myself and what I truly wanted in life. As I packed my bags for the trip, I felt a thrill of excitement. This was my journey, my path to discovering who I was outside of a relationship. I was moving forward, not with bitterness, but with hope and an open heart, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead.
I sat on the worn-out couch, a couch that once held stories of laughter and late-night movies. Now, it was just an old piece of furniture in a room filled with memories of a happier past. Sophie, my 3-year-old angel, was upstairs, her gentle breaths a stark contrast to the heavy air of our home. I glanced at the clock again. It was past 10 p.m. Mark was late, as had become his norm. The sound of the key turning in the lock finally broke the silence. I stood up, smoothing my shirt, not sure why I still bothered to look presentable for him. "Mark," I called out as he stepped in, looking more a stranger than the man I married. "You're late." He didn't meet my eyes, just grunted a response. "Work. It's always work." His voice, once filled with warmth and affection, now carried a cold, distant tone. I tried to sound casual. "Sophie asked about you today. She wanted to know when Daddy would be home." He shrugged off his coat, hanging it carelessly on the rack. "Kids ask a lot of things. Doesn't mean we always have answers." I felt a twinge of pain in my heart. "Maybe we could do something this weekend? Just the 3 of us? Sophie would love that." Mark snorted, his tone laced with sarcasm. "A family outing? With everything that's going on? Don't be naive, Lily." My hands trembled slightly. This wasn't the man I fell in love with. "It's important, Mark. She needs her father." He walked to the fridge, pulling out a beer. "What she needs is a miracle. Not me playing pretend in a park." I couldn't hold back my tears. "She's your daughter, Mark. How can you be so cold?" He took a swig of his beer, avoiding my gaze. "I'm being realistic, Lily. This isn't the life I wanted. A sick child, a house that feels more like a hospital." I followed him into the kitchen, my voice rising. "And what about me? Do you think I enjoy watching our daughter suffer? Do you think this is the life I dreamed of?" Mark slammed the beer bottle on the counter. "I don't know, Lily. I really don't. But I know I can't do this anymore." I felt a surge of anger. "You want to walk away? From your own child?" He drained his beer in one long gulp. "I need space. I can't deal with this suffocation." "Suffocation?" I echoed, disbelief in my voice. "Is that what your family is to you now?" Mark turned away, his shoulders tense. "It's not just that. It's everything. The constant hospital visits, the medical bills, the way our lives revolve around Sophie's illness. I didn't sign up for this." I was at a loss for words. How had our love turned into this bitter reality? "So, what's your plan, Mark? Leave us? Start over somewhere else?" He didn't answer, just walked past me, his footsteps heavy against the wooden floor. I stood there, a mix of emotions churning inside me. Anger, sadness, and a profound sense of betrayal. Later, as I lay in bed, the space next to me cold and empty, I listened to the distant sound of Mark's TV from the other room. The divide between us had grown too vast to bridge. The man I married, the father of my child, was now a stranger living under the same roof. The hospital room was stark and clinical, a sharp contrast to the warm, lived-in feel of our home. Sophie lay in the small hospital bed, her tiny chest rising and falling steadily. I sat beside her, holding her small hand, trying to draw strength from her innocent slumber. Nurse Janet walked in, her face a mask of professional kindness. "How's our brave girl doing today, Lily?" I managed a weary smile. "She's a fighter. Always has been." Janet checked Sophie's vitals, her movements efficient and gentle. "She's in good hands here. The surgery team is one of the best." I nodded, my throat tight with unspoken fears. "I know. I just wish Mark could be here more. She keeps asking for him." Janet gave me a sympathetic look. "Fathers often find it hard to cope with these situations. But you're doing an amazing job." I sighed, feeling the weight of loneliness. "It's hard doing it alone, you know? He's just not the same anymore." As if on cue, Mark walked in, his arrival less comforting than I had hoped. He glanced at Sophie and then at me, his expression unreadable. "How is she?" "The same," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. He fiddled with his phone, avoiding eye contact. "I can't stay long. Work's crazy." I felt a flash of anger. Work, right. Because that's what's important right now. Mark looked up, his eyes cold. What do you want from me, Lily? To sit here and watch her sleep? I bit back a sharp retort, focusing on Sophie instead. She asked for you today, Mark. She misses her dad. He shrugged, his detachment like a physical barrier. I'm here, aren't I? Before I could respond, Sophie stirred, her little voice weak but clear. Daddy? Mark's face softened momentarily as he moved closer to her. Hey, princess. Daddy's here. Sophie smiled faintly, reaching out for him. Stay with me, Daddy? I watched, a mix of hope and sorrow in my heart. Mark hesitated, then sat on the edge of the bed. I can't stay long, Sophie. Daddy has to work. Her smile faded, a look of understanding far beyond her years in her eyes. It's okay, Daddy. I love you. Mark forced a smile, patting her hand. I love you too, kiddo. As he stood to leave, I felt a surge of resentment. She needs you, Mark. We need you. He paused, his back to us. I'm doing what I can, Lily. But his words rang hollow in the sterile room. I watched him leave, a familiar sense of abandonment settling over me. Sophie's hand gripped mine, her small presence a reminder of the fight ahead of us. The room fell silent again, save for the beeping of the monitors. I leaned closer to Sophie, whispering promises of better days. Promises I wasn't sure I could keep. But in that moment, all I had was hope and the unwavering love for my daughter. The silence in the room was broken by a call from my friend Lisa, who worked as a realtor for a local company. I sat in the dimly lit hospital cafeteria, clutching a lukewarm cup of coffee. My mind was a whirlwind of betrayal and shock after Lisa's call. Mark was selling our house, our home. Anger and disbelief swirled within me, fueling a determination I hadn't felt in months. Lisa slid into the seat across from me, her expression a mix of concern and anger. I can't believe he's doing this, Lily. Selling your house while you're here, with Sophie. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands. I need you to delay the sale, Lisa. Buy me some time. Lisa nodded, her eyes hard. I'll do what I can, but we don't have much time. He's pushing for a quick sale. I leaned forward, my voice low and firm. I won't let him get away with this. He thinks he can just steal my house and run off with whoever she is? Lisa reached out, her hand gripping mine. Do you have a plan? A plan. The word echoed in my mind. I had been reactive for too long, letting life and Mark's indifference dictate my days. But not anymore. I'm going to fight back. I'll start by talking to a lawyer. There has to be a way to stop this. Lisa's expression shifted to one of support. Good. You fight this, Lily. And I'm here, every step of the way. I nodded, feeling a spark of resolve. And I'll need to gather evidence. Proof of his betrayal, the fraud. Anything that can help my case. Let's start with the house sale, Lisa suggested. I'll dig up everything I can on the buyer, the deal, anything out of the ordinary. I sipped my coffee, its bitterness mirroring my mood. I can't believe he's doing this to me, to Sophie. After everything we've been through. Lisa's hand tightened around mine. He's a coward, Lily. And he's going to regret underestimating you. I stood up, my resolve strengthening. He's going to pay for this, Lisa. He's going to pay for hurting my daughter, for trying to take away our home. I'll make sure of it. Lisa stood with me, her eyes fierce. Let's do this, Lily. Let's show him he picked the wrong woman to mess with. Hidden from view, I stood just outside the realtor's office, my heart racing. Through the slightly ajar door, I could hear the voices inside. Mark was there, his tone smooth and confident as he spoke to the potential buyers. And she was there too, his mistress, her laughter tinkling like a bell, completely oblivious to the storm she was a part of. I watched as Mark handed over a stack of papers to the buyers. His charm was on full display, the same charm that had once swept me off my feet. This is a fantastic opportunity, he was saying. A beautiful house, great location, you're getting a steal. The buyers, a middle-aged couple, nodded, their expressions a mix of eagerness and caution. The wife leafed through the documents, her husband leaning over to look. "It all seems in order," she murmured. Mark's mistress, a young woman with bright red lipstick, laughed and leaned closer to Mark. "Told you it would be easy," she whispered, loud enough for me to hear. I felt a surge of anger, but I forced myself to stay put, to observe. This was about gathering evidence, understanding the depth of Mark's deceit. The husband looked up, a question in his eyes. "And the current owner? She's agreed to all this?" Mark's response was swift, a lie so smooth it sounded like truth. "Absolutely. She's moved on. Wants to sell the place quickly." I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. How could he lie so blatantly? The audacity of it made my blood boil. Lisa, who was playing her part in my game, intervened. "We can proceed with the sale as soon as you're ready." The couple exchanged a look, then nodded. "We're ready. This is a deal we don't want to miss." I watched as they began to sign the papers, the finality of each stroke like a dagger in my heart. But I needed to stay focused. This was not the time for emotions, it was the time for action. Mark's laughter brought me back to the moment. He was toasting with the buyers, his mistress clinging to his arm. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. I stepped into the room, my gaze fixed on Mark. "Enjoying yourself, Mark?" Everyone turned, shock and confusion on their faces. Mark's smile faltered. "Lily, what are you doing here?" I walked up to them, my steps firm. "I'm here to stop you from making the biggest mistake of your life." Mark's mistress scoffed, rolling her eyes. "What are you talking about? The deal is done." I smiled, but it was cold, devoid of any warmth. "Is it, now? Because I don't remember signing off on selling my house." The buyers looked uncomfortable, exchanging glances. "We were told everything was in order," the husband said, his voice uncertain. Mark stepped forward, trying to assert control. "Lily, you're confused. This is for the best." I shook my head. "No, Mark. The only confusion here is yours if you think you can forge my signature and get away with it." The room went silent. Mark's face turned a shade paler. "You can't prove anything," he blurted out. I pulled out a set of documents from my bag. "Actually, I can. And I have. These are the real papers. The ones you have are forgeries." Mark's mistress tugged at his arm. "Mark, what's she talking about? Tell me this isn't true." But Mark was speechless, his usual confidence shattered. That's when the door opened, and two police officers walked in. One of the officers looked directly at Mark. "Mark Johnson? You're under arrest for fraud and forgery." Mark's face drained of color. He looked at me, his eyes filled with disbelief. "You called the cops?" I met his gaze, my voice steady. "Yes, I did. You broke the law, Mark. And you tried to steal my home." As the officers handcuffed Mark, his mistress started to cry, her makeup smearing. The buyers quickly gathered their things, eager to distance themselves from the situation. One of the officers turned to me. "We'll need your statement, ma'am." I nodded, feeling a sense of justice. "Of course, officer." As they led Mark away, he looked back at me, his expression a mix of anger and regret. But I felt no sympathy. He had made his choice, and now he was facing the consequences. Lisa smiled at me, nodding her head approvingly. I smiled back and left the office, a weight lifted off my shoulders. I had stood up for myself and Sophie. I had fought back. And this was just the beginning. After Mark's arrest, I found myself in the lawyer's office, the walls lined with law books and the air heavy with the scent of leather. My lawyer, Mr. Thompson, was a no-nonsense man in his 50s, his face etched with lines of experience. He glanced at the file in front of him. "Lily, your husband's actions have opened up a big can of worms. The fraud charge is serious." I sat across from him, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. "I know, Mr. Thompson. But I couldn't let him get away with it. Not after everything." Mr. Thompson nodded, understanding in his eyes. I respect that. Now, about the divorce and custody battle. You're in a strong position, but it won't be easy. I leaned forward. I'm ready for it. I have to do this for Sophie. She deserves a stable home. The lawyer shuffled some papers. What about alimony and child support? Given Mark's likely incarceration, it's going to be complicated. I sighed, a mix of determination and sadness in my voice. I want what's fair for Sophie. She's my priority. As for Mark, he made his choices. Mr. Thompson looked at me, his expression serious. You're a strong woman, Lily. We'll fight for what's right for you and your daughter. As I left the office, my phone rang. It was Mark. I hesitated but answered. What do you want, Mark? His voice came through, laced with desperation. Lily, please. I messed up. I know that. But don't take Sophie away from me. I stopped in my tracks, anger rising. You thought about Sophie when you tried to sell our house? When you spent your days with that woman? He was silent for a moment. I lost my way. But I'm her father, Lily. I love her. I clenched my phone tighter. Love isn't just words, Mark. It's actions. You failed us both. Mark's voice cracked. I'll do anything to make it right. Please, Lily. I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. It's too late for that. You'll see Sophie, but only under supervised visits. That's non-negotiable. There was a pause, then a soft, defeated sigh from Mark. Okay, I understand. The days were a whirlwind. I spent most of my time with Sophie, ensuring she felt loved and secure amidst the chaos. Her laughter was a balm to my wounded heart. One afternoon, while Sophie napped, I received a call from my sister, Laura. Hey, Lily, how are you holding up? Laura's voice was always a mix of concern and strength. I sighed, staring out the window. I'm managing, Laura. It's tough, but I'm getting through it. Laura was silent for a moment. I heard about Mark. I'm so sorry, Lily. But I'm proud of you for standing up to him. I smiled faintly. Thanks, Laura. It's hard, but I have to be strong for Sophie. She needs me now more than ever. Laura's voice softened. And what about you? Who's being strong for Lily? Her question caught me off guard. I had been so focused on Sophie and the legal battle that I hadn't given much thought to myself. I don't know, Laura. I guess I haven't had time to think about that. Laura was firm. You need to take care of yourself too, Lily. You can't pour from an empty cup. I knew she was right. I'll try, Laura. It's just, everything feels overwhelming right now. You're not alone, Lily. Remember that. I'm here for you, always. The next day, I visited a therapist, Dr. Martin. His office was a small, cozy room with soft lighting and a comfortable couch. He greeted me with a warm smile. Lily, it's good to meet you. How can I help you today? I took a deep breath, unloading my worries and fears. I just feel so lost, Dr. Martin. Everything I knew, everything I trusted, it's all been turned upside down. Dr. Martin nodded, his voice gentle. It's understandable to feel that way after what you've been through. But it's important to remember that this is a chapter in your life, not the whole story. His words resonated with me. Over the next few weeks, I started to take small steps towards reclaiming my life. I joined a support group for single parents. The first meeting was daunting, but as I listened to others share their stories, I realized I wasn't alone. Welcome, Lily, said the group leader, a kind woman named Beth. We're here to support each other, to share our struggles and our victories. I shared my story, my voice steady but filled with emotion. The group listened, their faces a tapestry of empathy and understanding. After the meeting, a woman named Sarah approached me. Your story is inspiring, Lily. You're stronger than you realize. Her words lifted my spirits. Maybe I was stronger than I thought. Maybe, just maybe, I could turn this painful chapter into a story of resilience and hope. Sitting in my living room, the early morning light filtering through the curtains, I reflected on the tumultuous journey that had led to this moment of tranquility. The divorce papers, now signed and finalized, lay on the coffee table, a testament to my newfound independence. The legal battle had been long and arduous. I had sued Mark for a substantial portion of his property, determined to secure a stable future for Sophie and myself. The court's decision had been in our favor. Mark, now serving a real sentence for his fraudulent activities, had lost much of what he had once held dear. His mistress, caught in the web of deceit, was slapped with a hefty fine, payable to me as restitution. I remembered sitting in the courtroom, watching Mark and his mistress turn on each other, each trying to deflect blame. There was no love lost between them, only bitter accusations and desperate attempts to save themselves. Watching them, I felt a sense of satisfaction. They had gotten what they deserved. Their betrayal and greed had led them to this downfall. But amidst the chaos of legal proceedings and emotional upheavals, there was a silver lining. Sophie, my brave little girl, had made a swift recovery after her surgery. Her laughter and energy filled our home with a warmth that had been missing for far too long. As I sipped my morning coffee, I thought about our future. It was a future I had fought hard for, a future that seemed bright and promising. Sophie was my priority, my beacon of hope. Together, we had weathered a storm and emerged stronger. I glanced at the pictures on the mantel, images of Sophie and me at the park, at the zoo, smiling and carefree. They were more than just photographs, they were reminders of our resilience, our ability to find joy amidst adversity. Sophie bounded into the room, her hair a tousled mess, her eyes bright with excitement. "Mommy, are we going to the park today?" I smiled, my heart swelling with love. "Yes, sweetheart. We're going to have a great day." She clapped her hands, her laughter echoing through the room. "Yay! I love the park." As I watched her play, I realized that this was what mattered the most. The struggles, the pain, and the betrayal were behind us. What lay ahead was a path of healing and new adventures.
My name is Clara, a 32-year-old woman who once believed in fairy tale endings. 3 years ago, my life took an unexpected turn when I met Mark, the man who would become my husband. This is our story, a journey of love, trust, and eventual betrayal, set against the backdrop of a seemingly perfect marriage. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning when fate led me to the corner cafe. With a John Grisham novel in hand, I was lost in the world of legal thrillers. That's when Mark entered, his presence immediately noticeable. He had an air of confidence, yet there was a warmth in his smile that felt inviting. "Hey, is that Grisham's latest?" he asked, nodding towards my book. His voice was friendly, tinged with genuine curiosity. "Yeah, just started it." "He's always a good read," I responded, pleasantly surprised by the ease of our conversation. We delved into a discussion about our favorite authors, our conversation flowing effortlessly. Mark had a way of making me laugh, his humor both witty and endearing. As hours passed, it felt like we were old friends catching up, rather than two strangers who had just met. In the weeks that followed, Mark and I grew closer. Our shared interests in music, particularly old jazz, and a mutual love for exploring hidden bookstores around the city, cemented our bond. He was charming, respectful, and attentive. I found myself eagerly anticipating our dates, each encounter leaving me more enchanted. One evening, as we walked along the river, Mark's tone turned serious. "Clara, I've never felt this way before. I think I'm falling for you," he confessed under the dim glow of the streetlights. His words sent a rush of warmth through me. "I feel the same, Mark." "You're unlike anyone I've ever met," I admitted, my heart racing with excitement and a hint of fear. 6 months flew by, and our relationship only grew stronger. It was during a cozy dinner at my apartment when Mark proposed. The moment was simple, yet profoundly sincere. There was no hesitation in my yes. I loved him, and I believed in our future together. The joy of our engagement, however, was soon met with apprehension as the time came to meet Mark's parents. His mother, Linda, was a stern woman with piercing eyes that seemed to judge my every move. His father was more amiable, but there was an undeniable seriousness to him, especially regarding the institution of marriage. During a formal dinner at their house, Mark's father brought up the subject of a prenuptial agreement. "It's just practical," he stated matter-of-factly. The request caught me off guard, but given my past experience with a cheating ex-boyfriend, I understood the necessity. "I agree, but I have a condition," I said, steadying my voice. "If either of us cheats, the cheater owes the other $100,000. Mark's expression was a mix of surprise and respect. "I promise, Clara, I'd never cheat on you," he said earnestly. I wanted to believe him, to trust that this time my heart was safe. Our wedding was a beautiful affair, filled with laughter, dancing, and promises of forever. The first year of our marriage felt like living in a dream. We traveled to romantic destinations, enjoyed quiet evenings at home, and supported each other's ambitions. Mark was not just my husband, he was my best friend, my confidant. After the whirlwind of our wedding, Mark and I settled into married life with an ease that surprised even me. Our first year was like living in a bubble of happiness, untouched by the outside world. Our honeymoon in Paris was a dream. Strolling along the Seine, we were just two lovebirds lost in a city of love. "Can you believe we're here?" I asked Mark one evening, as we watched the Eiffel Tower light up. He pulled me close and said, "With you, I can believe anything. This is just the start for us, Clara." Those days were filled with laughter, romantic dinners, and promises of a future together. We returned home with a suitcase full of memories and a bond that felt unbreakable. Back home, our days found a comfortable routine. Mark would kiss me goodbye every morning before heading to work, and I'd be waiting with dinner when he got back. We talked about everything and nothing, our conversations stretching late into the night. One night, as we were cleaning up after dinner, Mark said, "You know, I never thought I'd be this happy just doing mundane stuff like washing dishes." I playfully splashed some water at him. "That's because you've got an amazing wife. It's all about good company." He laughed, catching the water in his hands. "Absolutely. Best decision of my life, marrying you." Despite our happiness, there was a growing pressure from outside, the expectation of starting a family. At family gatherings, Mark's mom, Linda, would often drop not-so-subtle hints. "So, when are we going to hear some good news?" Linda asked one Sunday lunch, her tone laced with expectation. I tried to brush it off with a joke. "Oh, you'll be the first to know when there's news." But her persistence grew over time, and it started to strain me. Mark noticed my discomfort but reassured me, "Don't let my mom get to you. We'll start a family when we're ready, not a minute sooner." Despite these pressures, our first year of marriage was magical. We celebrated our first anniversary with a quiet dinner at home. Mark surprised me with a necklace I had admired months ago. "Happy anniversary, Clara. Here's to many more years of happiness," he said, his eyes shining with love. I felt tears prick my eyes as I said, "Thank you, Mark. I couldn't have asked for a better partner in life." That night, as we cuddled on the couch, I couldn't help but feel incredibly lucky. I had a husband who loved me, a cozy home, and a future that seemed bright. As our second year of marriage began, the pressure from Mark's family, especially his mother Linda, started to take a toll on me. It wasn't just about starting a family anymore, her criticisms seeped into every aspect of our lives. Linda had a way of making her disapproval known, often under the guise of helpful comments. Every visit became a nightmare for me. One afternoon, as I was setting the table for lunch, she walked into the kitchen and eyed the spread with a disapproving frown. "Is this what you're serving? A bit simple, don't you think?" Linda remarked, her tone dripping with disdain. I clenched my jaw, trying to maintain my composure. "I thought we'd enjoy something light today." She just sniffed, muttering under her breath about proper meals and good housekeeping. Her comments weren't just confined to my cooking. She found fault in everything I did, from the way I decorated the house to how I spent my free time. Nothing was off limits. One evening, while Mark and I were relaxing in the living room, Linda decided to give her unsolicited opinion. "You know, Clara, if Mark gave me the money he spends on you, I could hire a proper cleaner and a cook." Mark looked uncomfortable but didn't say anything. His silence felt like a betrayal. I was seething but managed to say, "Well, Linda, I'm doing my best here." What hurt the most was how Mark's attitude started to change. He began echoing his mother's criticisms, albeit in a more subtle way. After one of Linda's visits, Mark casually mentioned, "Mom might have a point about the house. Maybe we should consider getting some help." I felt a pang of hurt and frustration. "So, you think I can't handle it either?" "No, that's not what I meant," he backpedaled, but the damage was done. The constant criticisms and Mark's growing detachment were straining our marriage. We started having arguments over trivial things, our once easy conversations turning into tense exchanges. After a particularly heated argument, I found myself wondering aloud, "What happened to us, Mark? We used to be on the same team." He ran a hand through his hair, looking frustrated. "I don't know, Clara. It's just everything feels so complicated now." I went to bed that night feeling lonely and misunderstood. Linda's insidious comments had not only invaded my home but were also creeping into my marriage, leaving me to wonder if the love Mark and I shared was strong enough to withstand this constant barrage of negativity. As the third year of our marriage rolled in, a sense of unease began to settle in my heart. The once bright flame of our love seemed to flicker under the shadow of doubt and mistrust. It started with a phone call, or rather, several of them. A name kept popping up on Mark's phone, Jake. I couldn't help but notice how Mark's demeanor changed whenever that name flashed on the screen. One evening, while we were watching TV, his phone rang again. "Jake," the screen flashed. Mark quickly silenced it and put the phone away, but not before I saw the nervous glance he threw my way. "Who's Jake?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but my heart was pounding. "Oh, just a new guy at work. No one important," Mark replied, but his voice was too nonchalant, his answer too rehearsed. Mark's behavior began to change. He started coming home late from work, his excuses flimsy and inconsistent. His wardrobe underwent a transformation too, from casual to sharply tailored suits. "Working late again?" I questioned one night as he prepared to leave, noticing his dressed-up appearance. "Yeah, a big project," he said without meeting my eyes. "Don't wait up." One day, my frustration boiled over. As Mark was about to leave for another late night at work, I confronted him. "This isn't like you, Mark. What's really going on?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and fear. Mark sighed, his expression a mix of guilt and annoyance. "I told you, it's just work. Why can't you trust me?" "Because you're hiding something. You're never here, and when you are, it's like you're a million miles away," I shot back, my eyes stinging with tears. Mark didn't respond. He just grabbed his coat and left, leaving me standing there, feeling more alone than ever. That night, lying in our empty bed, I made a decision. I couldn't live in this limbo of doubt and suspicion. I needed to know the truth, whatever it was. The next morning, I called a private detective. It felt like a betrayal, but the constant worry and uncertainty were eating me alive. I needed answers, and I was determined to get them, no matter what they revealed about the man I thought I knew. The days after contacting the private detective were a haze of anxiety and anticipation. I felt like I was walking on a tightrope, trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy while my world was quietly crumbling around me. Then the call came, and with it, the shattering of my last hopes. "Mrs. Johnson, we have conclusive evidence." "I'm afraid your suspicions were correct." The detective's voice was solemn, heavy with the weight of the news he was delivering. He explained that Mark had been having an affair. The mysterious Jake on his phone was actually a woman. My heart sank as he detailed their meetings, providing timestamps and photos. It was irrefutable. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling a mix of devastation and vindication. My worst fears weren't just fears anymore, they were cold, hard facts. Despite the pain, I decided not to confront Mark immediately. I needed more than just the evidence of his infidelity, I needed to understand the full extent of his deceit. One evening, as I was passing by his home office, I overheard a conversation that chilled me to the bone. Mark was talking to his mother, Linda. "Mom, I'm planning to end it with Clara after your birthday." Mark's voice was cold, devoid of any affection he once had for me. "Oh, that's wise, dear. Make sure she gets me a nice 65th birthday present before you drop the bomb," Linda replied, her voice laced with a callousness that took my breath away. I leaned against the wall, feeling nauseous. Not only was my husband unfaithful, but he and his mother were plotting against me, waiting to use me for one last expensive gift before discarding me. Fueled by a mixture of anger and resolve, I decided to play along. I continued as if nothing was wrong while secretly gathering more evidence of Mark's infidelity. The detective provided me with everything: photos, videos, and even audio recordings. I was building my case, preparing for the moment I would strike back. As I lay in bed each night, next to the man who had betrayed me, a plan began to form in my mind. I would wait until after Linda's birthday. I would give them the illusion of victory, let them think they had outsmarted me. But when they least expected it, I would reveal everything and turn the tables. As Linda's 65th birthday approached, I put on a mask of ignorance, acting as though everything was normal. Inside, I was a cauldron of emotions: anger, betrayal, and a fierce determination to see my plan through. A few days before the birthday, Linda casually mentioned her upcoming celebration during a family dinner. "So, Clara, I'm expecting a grand 65th birthday. You must have planned something special for me," she said with a sly smile, clearly anticipating a lavish gift. Keeping my emotions in check, I replied with feigned enthusiasm, "Of course, Linda. I've arranged a dinner at the city's most luxurious restaurant. It'll be a night to remember." Her eyes lit up with glee, not realizing the trap I was setting. "Oh, how wonderful. I can't wait. Just a small family gathering, right?" "Yes, very intimate and exclusive, just for close family," I confirmed, my words laced with hidden irony. Later that night, Mark approached me, a hint of suspicion in his voice. "That's quite a generous plan for Mom's birthday. Are you sure about this?" I looked at him, maintaining my composure. "Absolutely. It's a significant birthday, and I want to do something special for her." Mark seemed appeased, but I could tell he was puzzled by my willingness to indulge his mother. As the day of the dinner drew near, I took care of the final arrangements. I confirmed the booking in Linda's name, rechecked the guest list, and made sure everything was set for the grand evening. I was playing the dutiful wife and daughter-in-law, but underneath the facade, I was ready to expose the betrayal and deceit that had been festering in our marriage. The night before the dinner, as I lay in bed, I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction. I was hours away from turning the tables on Mark and Linda. They thought they were using me for one last benefit before discarding me. Little did they know, I was the one controlling the game now. The evening of Linda's 65th birthday was set in a luxurious restaurant, every detail meticulously planned to reflect the grandeur of the occasion. As Linda reveled in the opulence, I played the part of the gracious daughter-in-law, masking my inner turmoil with a practiced smile. As the dinner drew to a close, the waiter presented the bill is for $4,500. I reached for my card with a steady hand, my heart pounding in my chest. After swiping the card, I glanced around the table, seeing Linda's satisfied smirk and Mark's uneasy expression. "Thank you for such a wonderful evening, Clara. This is truly generous," Linda cooed, her voice dripping with insincerity. It was then that Mark leaned in, his voice laced with mockery. "By the way, Clara, I want a divorce." The words hit me like a physical blow, but I refused to let them see my pain. Linda, seizing the moment, chimed in sharply, "Well, then, I guess you should leave. This is a family gathering, after all." Without a word, I stood up and left the restaurant, my dignity intact despite the turmoil inside. As I walked away, I pulled out my phone and swiftly canceled the payment. Then, with a few more taps, I blocked the shared account, ensuring Mark couldn't cover the cost either. Back at home, I packed my belongings quickly, the finality of my actions setting in. I was leaving this chapter of my life behind, stepping into an uncertain but hopeful future. Soon, my phone erupted with calls. I answered, and Linda's voice, shrill with rage and panic, filled my ears. The payment didn't go through. The restaurant staff called the police. "What have you done?" Her words were a cacophony of anger and disbelief, but I remained silent, letting her tirade wash over me. This was their doing, their betrayal and manipulation coming back to haunt them. After hanging up, I looked around the empty house, a place once filled with dreams and love now just a hollow shell. I took a deep breath, stepped out the door, and didn't look back. Their calls continued, a desperate plea for help that I no longer felt obliged to answer. I had made my move, exposed their deceit, and now it was time for me to rebuild, away from the lies and the pain that had defined my life for far too long. After leaving my marital home, I spent a restless night at a friend's place, my mind racing with what needed to be done next. The morning sun brought with it a sense of clarity and determination. It was time for the final confrontation. I arrived at the house to find Mark and Linda waiting, their faces a mix of anger and confusion. Clutching the divorce papers and the evidence of Mark's infidelity, I steeled myself for the battle ahead. Linda was the first to break the silence, her voice dripping with scorn. "So, you've come crawling back? After embarrassing us like that?" I met her gaze, unflinching. "I'm not here to crawl. I'm here for a divorce." Mark, who announced our divorce a day ago, suddenly tried to win everything back. "Clara, can't we talk about this? It was a mistake." I cut him off, holding up the evidence. "Save it, Mark. Your mistake was ongoing and well documented." Linda scoffed, trying to regain control. "You think you can just walk away and leave us with nothing? You're nothing without us." I laid the divorce papers on the table. "Actually, it's you who will be leaving me with something. According to our prenup, Mark owes me $100,000 for his infidelity." Mark's face went pale, and Linda's eyes widened in shock. As they scrambled to respond, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. This was it, the end of the lies, the deceit, and the pain. "You can try to fight this, but the evidence is clear. I suggest you pay up and move on," I said, my voice steady. Mark looked defeated, and Linda was speechless, her usual bravado gone. With no further words, I turned and walked out of the house, the door closing behind me with a finality that felt like freedom. The calls and pleas that followed fell on deaf ears. I had closed that chapter of my life for good. In the end, they paid. Mark had to borrow from his parents, but I didn't care where the money came from. It was a small compensation for the betrayal, but more importantly, it was closure. As I sat in the lawyer's office, signing the last of the papers, I felt a sense of peace. The journey had been painful, full of betrayal and heartache, but I had come out stronger, more resilient. I walked out into the sunlight, a free woman, ready to start anew. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape. After all the darkness, I finally felt like I was stepping into the light. Hello, I'm Sharon, a 26-year-old high school teacher. I've always believed in the quiet magic of everyday life, a belief that seemed to hold true until I met Alex. Our relationship blossomed rapidly, a whirlwind romance that caught me by surprise. When Alex suggested I meet his parents, I anticipated a normal family introduction. However, the reality was far from what I had expected. The day of the meeting was wrapped in an air of nervous anticipation. As a natural redhead, I've always stood out, but I never imagined it would become a point of contention. We arrived at Alex's parents' home, a quaint suburban house with a well-tended garden. Alex, sensing my anxiety, gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. "Don't worry, Sharon. It'll be fine," he said, trying to comfort me. Yet, the moment we entered, I felt like I had stepped onto unwelcoming territory. Mrs. Johnson, Alex's mother, greeted us with a polite but forced smile. Her eyes, however, narrowed slightly as she took in my appearance. "Oh, a redhead," she said, her tone laced with a hint of disdain. "You know what they say about redheads. They're always the ones to watch out for." I felt my face flush with embarrassment, the comment catching me off guard. Alex, clearly upset by his mother's words, responded with a hint of irritation in his voice. "Mom, that's an old wives' tale. Sharon is nothing like that." Mr. Johnson, who seemed younger than his years, stood by, nodding in agreement with his wife's assessment, but not contributing his own words to the conversation. Attempting to defuse the tension, I tried to turn the comment into a joke. "Well, the only thing I'm guilty of cheating on is my diet," I said, forcing a laugh. However, my attempt at humor fell flat. Mrs. Johnson's expression remained unamused. She turned to Alex, her voice firm and serious. "Alex, she's not right for you. We cannot approve of this." Alex's face grew stern, and he took a step forward, his voice laced with determination. "Mom, Dad, I love Sharon. If you can't accept her, then we'll have to do without your blessing." The rest of the visit passed in a blur of strained politeness and unspoken judgments. As we left, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being unfairly judged and labeled, all because of my hair color. After the unsettling encounter with Alex's parents, we decided to have a small, intimate wedding. It was just us and a few close friends in a little chapel downtown. The absence of Alex's family hung in the air, but we were determined to make the best of our day. On the morning of our wedding, as I was getting ready, my best friend and maid of honor, Sarah, tried to lighten the mood. "Sharon, you look stunning. Alex won't know what hit him," she said with a wink, helping me with the final touches. I smiled, grateful for her support. "Thanks, Sarah. I just wish Alex's parents could see past, well, my hair." Sarah frowned. "Forget about them, Sharon. Today's about you and Alex. It's your love that matters, not their approval." The ceremony was simple yet beautiful. As I walked down the aisle, I saw Alex waiting for me, his eyes brimming with love and emotion. In that moment, all my worries faded away. Alex whispered as I reached him, "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, Sharon." During the vows, Alex held my hands tightly. "Sharon, I may not have my parents here today, but standing with you, I know I have everything I need. You're my family now," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. I replied, my own voice filled with emotion, "Alex, I promise to stand by you, through challenges and joys. Your heart is my home." After the ceremony, our little group celebrated at a local restaurant. The laughter and joy around us were a stark contrast to the rejection we'd faced. Yet, in that small, cozy setting, I felt a sense of peace and belonging. As we cut the cake, Alex said jokingly, "Well, I guess this makes us official partners in crime now, right? Partners against the world?" I laughed, feeling a surge of happiness and love. "Absolutely, partners against the world." That night, as we returned home, Alex held me close. "Sharon, I know today wasn't what we initially dreamed of. But having you by my side makes it perfect." I nestled into his embrace, feeling a sense of completeness. Our quiet wedding, though not grand, was a profound declaration of our love and commitment, a testament to our strength together, despite the odds. After the wedding, Alex and I hoped things would settle down, but the dinners at his parents' house only grew more tense. Each visit was like walking on eggshells, with his mother's thinly veiled comments and the forced politeness of his father. One evening, we were sitting around the dinner table with Mr. and Mrs. Johnson and a couple of their friends. The conversation inevitably turned to gossip, and Mrs. Johnson's friend, Mrs. Blake, started a story about a neighbor. And would you believe it? Caught red-handed, cheating with the gardener. And she was a redhead too, Mrs. Blake exclaimed, casting a sly glance my way. I felt my face heat up. Trying to remain composed, I said, well, hair color hardly determines someone's character. Mrs. Johnson chimed in, oh, but you know how it is with stereotypes. There's always some truth to them. Alex, noticing my discomfort, quickly tried to change the subject. Mom, how about we talk about the new garden you were planning? Sharon has some great ideas for landscaping. But the damage was done. The insinuations hung in the air, making the rest of the dinner extremely uncomfortable. As we were leaving, I couldn't help but express my feelings to Alex. I can't keep doing this. It feels like they're judging me all the time. Alex sighed, a look of frustration crossing his face. I know, Sharon, and I'm sorry. I just don't understand why they can't give you a chance. On the drive home, we were both quiet, lost in our thoughts. The constant strain of these dinners was taking a toll on me, and I wondered how long we could endure this. The dinners at Alex's parents' house had always been a source of anxiety for me, but they became increasingly difficult when his mother started asking me uncomfortable questions. One such evening, I had reluctantly agreed to accompany Alex, hoping things might be different. But as we sat down for dinner, Mrs. Johnson's intrusive questioning began. So, Sharon, tell me about your work. How many male teachers are there at your school? Mrs. Johnson asked, her tone casual but her eyes sharp. I was taken aback by the directness of her question. There are a few, but I haven't really counted. Why do you ask? Mrs. Johnson leaned forward, her voice laced with insinuation. Just curious. Any of them particularly handsome? I could feel my face flush with discomfort. I really don't think of my colleagues that way, I replied, trying to keep my voice even. Alex, noticing my discomfort, chimed in, Mom, why does that matter? Sharon's committed to me, and that's all there is to it. Mrs. Johnson waved her hand dismissively. I'm just making conversation, dear. No need to get defensive. The dinner continued in this vein, with Mrs. Johnson probing and me trying to deflect her questions. It was clear she was insinuating something about my fidelity, which was both insulting and baseless. On our drive home, I expressed my feelings to Alex. I can't believe your mom. Her questions tonight were completely out of line. I felt like I was being interrogated. Alex sighed, his hand tightening on the steering wheel. I know, Sharon, it's ridiculous. I don't understand why she's acting like this. That's it, Alex. I don't think I can go back there. It's too much for me, I said, the decision weighing heavily on me but feeling necessary for my own peace of mind. Alex was silent for a moment before responding, I get it, Sharon. And I'm sorry. It's not fair to you. I'll talk to them about it. From then on, I stopped attending the dinners. Alex would go alone, and each time he left, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that I didn't have to face the awkwardness, and sadness at the rift growing within his family because of me. It had been several weeks since I decided to step away from the uncomfortable dinners at Alex's parents' house. This decision, though made to preserve my sanity, led to a series of unsettling revelations that Alex brought home from his solo visits. Each account seemed more incredulous than the last, leaving us in a state of constant bewilderment and frustration. One such evening, as we curled up on our sofa, the comforting warmth of our home contrasted sharply with the cold tension Alex had carried back. He seemed particularly distressed, his normally calm demeanor replaced by a look of utter disbelief. Sharon, I'm not sure how to even start explaining what happened tonight, Alex said, his voice heavy with unease. What happened? You look really upset, Alex, I replied, my heart starting to race with worry. He took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. You know I've been going to these dinners alone, right? Well, tonight, Mom took it to another level. She had invited several young women over. It wasn't just a friendly gathering, Sharon. It felt like she was setting up dates for me, as if I wasn't already married. I felt a mix of shock and disbelief wash over me. Setting up dates? But why would she do that? Does she not realize we're married and committed to each other? I tried to make sense of it all, Alex continued, his frustration growing. I asked her outright why she was doing this. Her response was simply that she wanted me to keep my options open. As if our marriage was just a temporary arrangement. Options open? I echoed, incredulous. That's absurd, Alex. We took vows. This isn't some casual fling that she can just dismiss. Alex nodded, his hands clenched in frustration. Exactly. I told her that I'm committed to you, that you're my wife and I love you. But she just seemed to brush it off, as if our marriage was some sort of juvenile phase. The conversation left us both reeling. The next morning, as I recounted the incident to my friend Sarah over a cup of coffee, her reaction mirrored my own. That's outrageous, Sharon. How can his mother blatantly disrespect your marriage like that? It's almost like she's trying to sabotage it, Sarah exclaimed, her eyes wide with shock. I don't know, but I can't keep dealing with this. It's like she's living in denial, I replied, feeling drained just thinking about it. Alex and I agreed that we needed to create some distance from his parents. This decision, though difficult, was necessary to protect our marriage from the constant undermining and disrespect. However, the following weeks, though void of direct confrontation, carried an undercurrent of unease and tension. As the days passed, I found myself constantly reflecting on Mrs. Johnson's actions. Her blatant attempts to set Alex up with other women, right under our noses, were a direct attack on our relationship. I wondered what we had done to deserve this treatment. Why was she so intent on destroying our happiness? Alex, too, was deeply troubled. I just don't understand her, Sharon. Why can't she see how happy we are together? Why can't she accept our marriage? The distance we created from Alex's parents brought a temporary peace, but that calm was shattered one ordinary school day. I was in the teacher's lounge when Mr. Davis, the school principal, approached me with a concerned expression. Sharon, can I have a word with you in my office? He asked in a tone that immediately set me on edge. Of course, Mr. Davis, I replied, my mind racing with possibilities. In his office, Mr. Davis closed the door and gestured for me to sit. Sharon, I had a rather unusual visitor today, he began, his brows furrowed in disapproval. My heart sank. Who was it? Your mother-in-law, Mrs. Johnson, he said. She was asking some very personal questions about you, your behavior at school, and your interactions with male colleagues. I was stunned into silence. The idea that Mrs. Johnson would go to such lengths was beyond belief. What did you tell her? I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. I told her that your personal life is none of our business as long as it doesn't affect your professional conduct, which, by the way, has always been exemplary, Mr. Davis replied firmly. But Sharon, I must say, this is highly inappropriate and concerning. Gathering my thoughts, I replied, I'm so sorry, Mr. Davis. I had no idea she would do something like this. I assure you, there's nothing untoward in my conduct at school. I know that, Sharon. I just thought you should be aware, he said, offering a sympathetic look. As I left his office, a mixture of embarrassment and anger washed over me. The fact that Mrs. Johnson had the audacity to come to my workplace and question my integrity was outrageous. That evening, I recounted the incident to Alex, who listened in shocked silence. I can't believe she did that. Going to your school? Questioning your professionalism? This is going too far, Sharon, he said, his voice laced with anger. I don't know what she's trying to achieve, I said, feeling a mix of frustration and helplessness. But this is a violation of my privacy and my professional life. Alex reached for my hand, his grip firm. We need to confront her, Sharon. This can't go on. She's crossing every line imaginable. The next day, I called Mrs. Johnson, my hands trembling with a mix of nervousness and anger. The phone rang, and when she answered, I took a deep breath. "Mrs. Johnson, I need to talk to you about your visit to my school," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, Sharon, I was just looking out for my son's best interests," she replied, her tone dismissive. "Looking out for Alex by questioning my character at my workplace? That's completely unacceptable, Mrs. Johnson," I retorted, my frustration boiling over. "Well, I just needed to make sure that everything was appropriate," she said, her voice cold. "Your actions were inappropriate, and I won't tolerate this kind of invasion into my personal and professional life," I said firmly, drawing a line. Months had passed since the school incident with Mrs. Johnson, and Alex and I had begun to find some semblance of normalcy in our lives again. That fragile peace was shattered one evening when Mrs. Johnson unexpectedly appeared at our doorstep, her face twisted into a triumphant smirk. "I knew it. I have proof, Sharon," she exclaimed as soon as I opened the door, not even waiting for an invitation to enter. Alex, hearing the commotion, came to the living room. "Mom, what are you talking about? What proof?" Mrs. Johnson, brandishing a laptop like a weapon, declared, "I hired a private detective. I have photos and videos of Sharon. She's been unfaithful, Alex." I felt my heart drop, confusion and disbelief swirling within me. "That's ridiculous. I've never been unfaithful," I protested, my voice firm despite the shock. Ignoring my protest, Mrs. Johnson opened her laptop, revealing a series of photos of me sitting in a cafe with a man sporting bright red hair. "Look at these, Alex. See for yourself." Alex and I leaned in to look at the photos. After a moment, we couldn't help but burst into laughter, much to Mrs. Johnson's confusion. "That's my brother, Mrs. Johnson," I explained between laughs. "He's visiting from out of town." Mrs. Johnson's triumphant expression faltered. "Your brother?" "Yes, my brother," I repeated, still chuckling. "We both have the same bright red hair, remember?" Alex, now frowning, asked to see the videos. As we watched a clip of me and my brother chatting in the cafe, Alex's attention was drawn to something in the background. "Wait, rewind that part," he said, pointing at the screen. We all watched as, in the background of the video, an older man and a younger woman were sitting at a nearby table, engaged in a rather intimate moment. The realization hit us all at once. "That's Dad?" Alex muttered in disbelief. Mrs. Johnson's face went pale as she recognized her husband in the video, kissing a woman who was definitely not her. The room fell into a stunned silence. The evidence Mrs. Johnson had brought to condemn me had inadvertently exposed her own husband's infidelity. "Mom, is that Dad?" Alex asked again, his voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Johnson just sat there, speechless, the laptop now forgotten on her lap. That evening, which began with accusations and supposed revelations, ended with a shocking twist that none of us could have predicted. Mrs. Johnson, in her quest to prove my unfaithfulness, had inadvertently uncovered a bitter truth about her own marriage. The night Mrs. Johnson left our house was one we wouldn't forget anytime soon. The living room, where just moments ago she had revealed the photos and videos, felt unnaturally quiet. Alex and I sat there, trying to digest the whirlwind of events. "Can you believe it? My dad and Mom's plan backfiring like this?" Alex finally broke the silence, a mix of disbelief and sadness in his voice. "It's surreal," I replied, still feeling a bit numb. She was so intent on proving me wrong, she didn't see the bigger picture. Alex sighed heavily, looking out the window. "I feel like I don't even know my parents anymore. This whole thing, it's just a mess." I nodded in agreement, feeling a pang of empathy for him. "I'm sorry, Alex. This must be really hard for you." He turned to face me, his expression softening. "You know, in a weird way, I'm grateful for your strength through all this. You could have easily walked away from the drama." I reached out, taking his hand in mine. "I wouldn't do that. We're in this together, remember? Over the next few days, Alex's phone was bombarded with calls and messages from his mother. She was frantic, seeking someone to confide in, but Alex wasn't ready to talk. He needed time to process the betrayal and the unraveling of his family. One evening, as we were prepping dinner, Alex brought up the subject again. "I spoke to Dad today," he said, chopping vegetables a bit more forcefully than necessary. "And, how did that go?" I asked, curious yet apprehensive. He admitted everything. Said it had been going on for a while. He's moving out, and they're talking about divorce. Alex's voice was flat, almost detached. "That's tough, Alex. I'm sorry you have to go through all this." I reached out to squeeze his arm. He shrugged, a sad smile on his face. "It's weird. I'm angry, but also relieved that the truth is out. No more secrets and lies." As the days turned into weeks, the reality of his parents' impending divorce began to sink in. We had many long conversations about trust, honesty, and the complexities of relationships. One night, curled up on the couch, Alex shared his thoughts. "You know, Sharon, all this with my parents, it's made me realize how important honesty is. And how much I value what we have." I leaned against him, feeling a sense of solidarity. "I agree. It's been a roller coaster, but it's also shown us how strong we can be together." "Exactly. We've weathered this storm as a team. It's not been easy, but I feel like we can handle anything now," Alex said, a note of determination in his voice. In the weeks that followed, we saw less of Mrs. Johnson. The revelation of her husband's affair and the subsequent fallout had taken its toll on her. Despite everything, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for her. But still I couldn't forgive her. Not now. Maybe someday I'll be able to forget about what she did to me. Today, I am completely passionate about my husband, and we are expecting a baby soon. And who knows, he'll probably be as red-haired as me. "Hey, you're Megan, right? That's how it all started." Me, a librarian with a love for quiet evenings and books, and him, Alex, an economist with a sharp mind and an even sharper tongue. We were at this billiards club downtown, a place more accustomed to clinking glasses and raucous laughter than fairy tale meetings. But there we were. Alex was leaning against the pool table, chalk in hand, looking every bit the confident man he was. His friends were egging him on, making a ruckus every time he pocketed a ball. I was there with my own crew, having a laugh, trying to unwind after a long week shelving books and answering never-ending queries about the latest bestseller. My friend, Jenna, nudged me, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Bet you can't beat that guy," she said, pointing at Alex. I rolled my eyes. "Oh, please, I'm here to relax, not show off my surprisingly decent pool skills." But Jenna wouldn't have it. "Come on, Megan. Don't be a chicken. Plus, he's cute." I sighed, downed my drink, and sauntered over. "Hey, you up for a challenge?" I asked, trying not to sound too eager. Alex looked me up and down, a smirk playing on his lips. "Sure, but fair warning, I don't go easy on anyone." I chuckled, neither do I. The game was on. It was a close call, but guess what? I won. His friends hooted and hollered, while Alex just stared in disbelief. "Damn, you're good," he admitted, extending his hand. "I'm Alex." I shook his hand, feeling the firm grip. "Megan. And thanks, I know." We grabbed drinks, and the conversation flowed as easily as the beer. He told me about his job, how he crunches numbers and deals with corporate bigwigs. I told him about the library, the silence, and my secret love for old mystery novels. "So, a librarian, huh? That's different," he said, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah, well, I like it. Books are simpler than people," I replied, taking a sip of my drink. Alex laughed. "I can imagine. But you seem to handle people pretty well too." The evening rolled on, and before I knew it, I was agreeing to see him again. It was crazy, unexpected, but exciting. A few weeks later, he introduced me to his parents. His dad, George, was a soft-spoken man with a warm smile. His mom, Linda, was all charm and grace, or so it seemed. "Nice to finally meet you, Megan. Alex hasn't stopped talking about the girl who beat him at pool," Linda said, her voice dripping with something I couldn't quite place. I smiled, trying to keep it polite. "Well, it was just a lucky shot." "Oh, I doubt that," Linda said, her eyes sharp. "Alex isn't easily beaten." The evening passed with more small talk, a few laughs, and a sense that maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something good. If only I knew then what was lurking beneath those polite smiles and casual conversations. After a few blissful months, Alex and I found ourselves seated at his parents' dining table for a family dinner. It was supposed to be a regular evening, good food, a bit of wine, and casual conversation. But, oh, how wrong I was. Linda, always the hostess, had laid out an impressive spread. Roast chicken, veggies, and all the trimmings. George, as usual, was quiet but had a welcoming smile. The evening started off well enough, with light banter and updates about our lives. Then, as we were digging into dessert, Linda turned to Alex, her tone casual yet loaded. "So, Alex, now that you're married, how much will you be sending us each month?" I nearly choked on my pie. Alex put down his fork, his face a mixture of surprise and discomfort. "Mom, what do you mean? Megan and I have our expenses, and we haven't really discussed." Linda cut him off, her voice sharp. "Well, you've been helping out with our bills, haven't you? It's only right you continue. After all, family supports each other." I glanced at Alex, unsure of how to react. This was new to me. Alex never mentioned any financial help to his parents. George tried to intervene, his voice gentle. "Linda, let's not discuss this at the dinner table." But Linda was relentless. "No, George, this is important. We need to know. We have our expenses, and Alex has always helped." Alex cleared his throat, trying to keep the peace. "Mom, things have changed. Megan and I have our own family to think about now. I can't promise anything regular." Linda's face turned red, her eyes blazing. "Changed? So, what? We're not family anymore. Is that it? You get a wife, and suddenly your parents don't matter." I was stunned. This wasn't the Linda I met a few months back. This was someone else, someone consumed by greed and anger. "Mom, that's not fair. You know I care about you and Dad, but I have responsibilities," Alex said, his voice firm yet calm. Linda slammed her hand on the table. "Responsibilities? To her?" She pointed at me, her words like daggers. "What has she done for you? We raised you, and this is how you repay us? By abandoning us for some librarian?" I felt a knot in my stomach. This wasn't just about money, it was personal. I tried to speak up. "Linda, I don't think." "Stay out of this," she snapped. "This is between me and my son. You're just the parasite who's taking him away from his family." The air in the room was thick with tension. George reached for Linda's hand, trying to calm her. "Linda, please, let's not say things we'll regret." But Linda was beyond reason. "Regret? The only regret here is that my son married someone who's now taking him away from his duties as a son." Alex stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "Mom, that's enough. You're being unreasonable and insulting. I won't let you talk to Megan like that." The rest of the evening was a blur. We left soon after, the sound of Linda's angry rants echoing in our ears. The weeks following that disastrous dinner were tough. Linda's words hung over our heads like a dark cloud. One Saturday morning, as we sipped our coffee, Alex broke the silence. "Megan, I'm sorry about all this. I never expected my mom to go off the rails like that." I put down my cup, meeting his gaze. "Alex, it's not your fault, but we can't pretend everything's fine. Your mom, she's got some serious issues with us." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know. I've been thinking, maybe we should lay low for a while. Avoid any family gatherings. I nodded, though a part of me felt uneasy. Avoiding the problem wouldn't make it disappear. Things took a turn for the worse when Linda started dropping by unannounced. It was like she was on a mission to find faults. One afternoon, she barged in as I was rearranging the living room. What's all this? She snapped, eyeing the new curtains and cushions. I forced a smile. Just sprucing up the place a bit. Linda snorted. With what money? Alex's. I clenched my jaw. Actually, I bought these. With my own money. She scoffed, looking around with a critical eye. Must be nice, spending money on frivolous things while your husband's parents struggle. Before I could respond, Alex walked in. Mom, what are you doing here? Linda turned to him, her voice laced with accusation. Just seeing how my son's hard-earned money is being wasted. Alex's face hardened. Mom, this has to stop. Megan's not wasting anything. She's entitled to buy whatever she wants with her money. The argument escalated, with Linda hurling insults and Alex trying to defend me. It was exhausting, watching the two most important people in my life at each other's throats. After Linda stormed out, Alex slumped onto the sofa, his face in his hands. I don't know what to do, Megan. She's my mom, but I can't let her treat you like this. I sat beside him, my heart heavy. We'll figure it out, Alex. But we can't let her walk all over us. Maybe it's time we set some boundaries. He looked up, his eyes searching mine. You're right. I'll talk to her. Lay down some ground rules. But things didn't get better. Linda's visits became more frequent and more invasive. She'd criticize everything from the way I dressed to how we decorated our home. It was like she was looking for any excuse to put me down. Living with Linda's constant scrutiny was like constantly walking on eggshells. You never knew when she would strike next, and her next target was something as mundane as a new washing machine. It was a regular Saturday afternoon. Alex and I were in the living room, enjoying a rare moment of peace, when Linda burst in, her face twisted in suspicion. I see you've got a new washing machine, she accused, her eyes darting around the room. Tell me, was it Alex's money that paid for it? I sighed, feeling the familiar knot of frustration in my stomach. Linda, it's just a washing machine. And for your information, I paid for it myself. She didn't seem convinced. With what money? I find it hard to believe a librarian can afford such luxuries. Alex, who had been quiet until now, stood up. Mom, Megan has her own income. She can buy whatever she needs. But Linda was relentless. I want proof. Show me a bank statement or something. I won't have you squandering my son's hard-earned money. I couldn't believe she was serious. But to put an end to her ridiculous accusations, I went and fetched my bank statement. I handed it to her, my hands shaking slightly with anger. Here, see for yourself. The washing machine was paid for with my money. My savings. Linda scrutinized the statement, her brows furrowed. After a moment, she looked up, her face still a picture of disbelief. Well, I suppose this looks in order, but keep in mind, I'm watching. My son's well-being is my priority. Alex stepped in, his voice firm. Mom, this is unacceptable. You can't just barge in here and demand to see our personal finances. It's disrespectful. Linda huffed, her stance unyielding. Disrespectful? I'm looking out for my son. If that's disrespectful, then so be it. The tension in the air was thick. Alex's face hardened. Mom, if you can't trust and respect us, then maybe you should reconsider your visits. Linda looked like she had been slapped. Reconsider my visits? To my own son's house? Alex nodded. Yes, until you can behave in a more respectful manner. She stormed out, the door slamming behind her. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken words. If I thought things with Linda couldn't get worse, I was in for a rude awakening. The real showdown happened the night of Alex's company party. It was supposed to be a big deal for him, and I wanted to make it special. That evening, I dressed in a new evening gown I'd bought just for the occasion. It was elegant, a turquoise that shimmered under the light. I was admiring myself in the mirror when the doorbell rang. Alex was still in the shower, so I went to answer it. Standing there, to my dismay, was Linda, her eyes immediately zeroing in on my dress. Well, isn't that fancy? How much did this little number set Alex back? I clenched my teeth, trying to keep my cool. Linda, it's nice to see you. This dress was my purchase, and it didn't set Alex back anything. She walked in, uninvited, her gaze critical. Surely you don't expect me to believe you can afford a dress like that on a librarian's salary. Before I could respond, Alex came out, looking sharp in his suit. Mom, what are you doing here? She turned to him, her tone accusatory. I was just asking Megan about her dress. It looks expensive. Alex sighed, his expression tired. Mom, not this again. Megan bought it herself. Can we please not do this tonight? Linda's eyes narrowed. I just find it hard to believe, is all. With the way she spends, one would think she's trying to bankrupt you. I was about to retort when suddenly, Linda's hand, holding a glass of cherry juice, accidentally slipped, splashing the juice all over my dress. I gasped, my eyes wide in shock. Linda, what the hell? Linda put a hand over her mouth, a fake look of concern on her face. Oh, dear. How clumsy of me. I'm so sorry, Megan. Alex's face was a mask of anger. Mom, that was clearly on purpose. What are you trying to do? She shrugged, her act dropping. I'm just showing what happens when you live beyond your means. Maybe next time, you'll think twice before buying such extravagant things. I was shaking, rage and humiliation battling inside me. This is unbelievable, Linda. You've crossed a line. Alex stepped in between us. That's enough, Mom. You need to leave. Now. As she stormed out, Alex turned to me, his eyes filled with concern. Megan, I'm so sorry. Let me help you clean that up. But the dress was ruined, the bright red stain mocking me from the fabric. I held back tears, the evening spoiled. The incident with the dress was the last straw. Alex and I knew we had to confront Linda, set things straight once and for all. So, we decided to invite her over, hoping to have a civil conversation. Naive, I know. Linda arrived with her usual air of superiority. We sat in the living room, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Alex cleared his throat, starting what we both knew was going to be a difficult talk. Mom, we need to discuss your behavior, he began, his voice steady but firm. Linda raised an eyebrow. My behavior? I'm not the one parading around in expensive dresses, am I? I bit my lip, trying to keep my cool. Linda, this isn't about the dress. It's about respect, boundaries. You can't just barge into our lives, make accusations, and ruin our things. She scoffed. Oh, please. You make it sound like I'm some tyrant. I'm just concerned about my son's well-being. Alex interjected. Mom, what you did to Megan's dress was unacceptable. And your constant questioning of our finances, it's invasive and disrespectful. Linda folded her arms, her expression unyielding. Invasive? Disrespectful? I'm your mother, Alex. It's my right to know where your money is going, especially when it's being wasted on frivolities. That's when she dropped the bombshell. In fact, I think it's only fair that if you buy something for Megan, you should buy something of equal value for me. After all, I am your mother. I stared at her in disbelief. Are you serious? That's ridiculous. Alex was just as stunned. Mom, that's an absurd demand. We're not going to do that. Linda's face turned red with anger. Absurd? I gave birth to you, raised you, and this is the thanks I get? You choosing this woman over your own mother. Alex stood up, his anger palpable. This isn't about choosing, Mom. It's about fairness, respect. Megan is my wife, and you can't treat her like this. Linda stood up too, her voice rising. Fine. If that's how you want it, then don't expect any help from me when you need it. Don't come crying to me when this marriage falls apart because you're too blind to see what's going on. With that, she stormed out, leaving a trail of bitterness and shock in her wake. Alex and I sat there, stunned. The ultimatum she had given us was not just outrageous, it was hurtful. Alex put his head in his hands. I can't believe she said that. I don't know what to do. I reached over, taking his hand. We'll figure this out, Alex. But we can't give in to her demands. That's not how this works. He nodded, a look of determination in his eyes. You're right. We can't let her control us, dictate our lives. It's not fair to you, to us. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more strained with Linda, the universe decided to throw us another curveball. It all started on our anniversary. Alex surprised me with a beautiful diamond ring worth $10,000. It was more than just a piece of jewelry, it was a symbol of our love, something precious and personal. A week after the anniversary, Linda decided to pay us an unexpected visit. She walked in as if nothing had happened, as if her last visit and the ultimatum hadn't left a bitter taste in all our mouths. Hello, Megan, Alex, she said, her voice dripping with a forced sweetness. I just thought I'd drop by, see how you're both doing. I exchanged a wary glance with Alex. We're fine, Linda. What brings you here? She wandered around, feigning interest in the mundane, but her eyes were scanning, always scanning. It wasn't until she noticed the ring on my finger that her facade cracked. Oh, what's this? She reached for my hand, her fingers cold against my skin. A new ring? Looks expensive. Alex, who had been silent, spoke up. It's an anniversary gift, Mom. Linda raised an eyebrow. Really? Must have cost a pretty penny. I hope you're not dipping into your savings for this. I pulled my hand away, feeling a surge of anger. It's none of your business, Linda. She shrugged, but her eyes lingered on the ring with a gleam that I didn't like. The next day, the unthinkable happened. The ring was gone. I turned the house upside down, but it was nowhere to be found. Panic and suspicion gnawed at me. There was only one person who could have taken it. I called Alex, my voice shaking. The ring is gone. I can't find it anywhere. There was a pause, and then, are you thinking what I'm thinking? Linda, we both said in unison. Alex decided to confront her. He called her, his voice a mix of anger and disbelief. Mom, did you take Megan's ring? Her laughter on the other end was like ice. Oh, Alex, really? Why would I take her ring? You're being ridiculous. But there was something in her tone, a hint of mockery, that made my blood boil. We'll go to the police, Linda. This is theft. Her laughter continued, unfazed. Go ahead. You have no proof. It's your word against mine. We were at a loss. The ring was gone, and with it, a piece of our happiness. But then, a few days later, George called. Alex, your mom's not well. She's hurt her hand. She won't go to the hospital, but I think she should. We rushed over, and there she was, her hand bandaged, tears in her eyes. But it wasn't just pain, there was fear there too. What happened, Linda? Alex asked, his voice softening despite everything. She mumbled something about a fall, but when she moved her hand, I saw it. The diamond ring was on her finger, stuck, her finger swollen around it. We had to take her to the hospital. The ring had to be removed under local anesthesia. It was a surreal experience, watching the doctors carefully extract the symbol of our love from the finger of the woman who had caused us so much pain. The whole ring fiasco had pushed us to our limits. Linda, even after the hospital incident, didn't seem to get the gravity of her actions. It was like she was living in her own world, where she could do no wrong. Alex and I were fed up. It was time for a final showdown. We called her over, making it clear this wasn't a friendly visit. When she walked in, there was this arrogance about her, like she still owned the place. "Sit down, Mom. We need to talk," Alex said, his voice hard. She rolled her eyes, taking a seat. "What now? More accusations?" I couldn't believe her nerve. "Accusations? Linda, you stole from us. And you act like it's nothing?" She shrugged, a smirk on her face. "Oh, come on. It was just a ring. No need to make such a big deal out of it." Alex slammed his hand on the table, his patience running thin. "Just a ring? You broke our trust, Mom. You've been nothing but trouble since Megan and I got married." Linda scoffed. "Trouble? I'm the victim here. You've changed, Alex. This woman has changed you." That did it. I was seething. "This woman has a name, Linda. And I'm sick of your crap. We've been nothing but patient with you, but you just keep pushing and pushing." Alex nodded, his expression stern. "We're at the end of our rope, Mom. We're not going to sit back and let you walk all over us. That ring stunt? We could go to the police with that." Linda's face fell a bit at that. "You wouldn't dare." "Try us," I shot back. "You need to change your attitude, Linda, or else we're done. No more visits, no more calls. Nothing." She looked at us, finally realizing we meant business. "You're bluffing." Alex stood up, his decision clear. "No, we're not. This is your last chance, Mom. Shape up, or we're cutting you out of our lives." Linda stood too, her face a mix of anger and disbelief. "Fine. If that's how you want it, then have it your way. But don't come crawling back to me." With that, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Alex and I just sat there, the silence heavy. In the weeks that followed, we stuck to our word. No calls, no visits. It was tough, especially on Alex, but it was necessary. We needed peace, a break from the constant drama and disrespect. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one. We had to protect our marriage, our sanity, and sometimes that meant making tough choices, even if it hurt. Hey there, I'm Kylie, and here's my story. I'm 28, love fitness, and I teach at a local gym. That's where I met Jack, a regular who soon became much more. We clicked instantly. Before I knew it, we were planning a wedding. Jack's got a younger brother, Mike. Cool guy, really. We hit it off as friends from the get-go. Now, Jack's mom, Linda? That's a whole other story. She's had it out for me since day one. Thinks I'm just some gym rat leading her sons astray. One day, Jack, Mike, and I were at the gym. Jack was lifting weights, Mike was on the treadmill, and I was coaching a class. Linda walked in, unexpected. Hey, Linda. I greeted her, trying to be friendly. She just narrowed her eyes at me, watching my boys. Are you? I was taken aback. Just doing my job here. Linda scoffed. Job? Parading around in those tight clothes? Jack, hearing this, dropped his weights with a clang and came over. Mom, come on. That's not fair. Linda turned to him. Fair? I know what I see. Your wife's too friendly with everyone, especially men. Mike, panting from his run, joined us. Mom, you're being ridiculous. Linda shot him a look. Don't you start. I know what's going on here. I tried to calm the situation. Linda, I'm just working. There's nothing going on. But Linda was on a roll. I've seen your Instagram, Kylie. All those likes and comments from men. What's that about? Jack intervened. Mom, those are just her clients and friends. Linda wasn't having it. Friends? Or something more? You need to open your eyes, Jack. I could feel the tension rising. This wasn't new. Linda had always been suspicious of me, but this was the first time she'd confronted me so openly. Look, Linda, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, I love Jack. Nothing's going on. Linda just huffed. We'll see about that. She stormed out, leaving the three of us in an awkward silence. Jack put his arm around me. Sorry about her, Kylie. She's just protective. Mike chimed in. Yeah, protective like a bulldog. I tried to laugh it off, but deep down, Linda's words stung. I knew this was just the beginning of something bigger, something messier. But there I was, caught in the middle of a family I was trying so hard to be a part of. That night, as Jack and I lay in bed, he turned to me. You know I trust you, right? I nodded. I know. But your mom. Jack sighed. Yeah, my mom. She's always been tough, but we'll get through this. Together. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But Linda's accusations lingered in my mind, a dark cloud over our marriage that I couldn't shake off. And that was just the beginning. It wasn't long after Linda's gym outburst that things took a turn for the worse. We were all at Jack's place for a family dinner, me, Jack, Mike, and, of course, Linda. The air was already heavy with unspoken tension. Mike was the first to break the silence. So, Kylie, how's the gym life treating you? I smiled, trying to keep things light. Same old, really. Busy as ever. Linda, who had been quietly seething, saw her chance. Busy flirting with your male clients, you mean? Her voice was like ice. Jack, sitting next to me, stiffened. Mom, not now, please. But Linda was relentless. Oh, I'll say what I need to. I saw those comments on your Instagram, Kylie. Men drooling over you like you're some kind of prize. I could feel my face flushing with anger and embarrassment. Linda, those are just clients and gym friends. Nothing inappropriate. She snorted. Friends? Is that what they call it these days? Mike jumped in, trying to defend me. Mom, you're way off base here. Linda turned her glare to him. And you? Always defending her. What's going on between you two? Always together, always whispering. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Jack's face was a mix of confusion and anger. Mom, what the hell are you talking about? Linda leaned forward, eyes locked on mine. I'm talking about betrayal, Jack. Your wife and your brother, sneaking around. I was speechless. This was insane. Linda, that's a disgusting thing to say. Mike's like a brother to me. Mike was red-faced. Mom, you're way out of line. Kylie's my sister-in-law. That's it. Jack's voice was low and dangerous. Mom, you need to stop. This is crazy. But Linda wouldn't let up. Open your eyes, Jack. I'm just trying to protect you from her. The rest of the meal passed in uncomfortable silence. After dinner, Jack confronted me in our bedroom, his voice shaking with barely contained fury. Kylie, is there any truth to what my mom is saying? About you and Mike? I felt like I'd been slapped. Jack, are you serious? Your mom's accusations are insane. You know me. You know Mike. How could you even think? Jack paced the room, running his hands through his hair. I don't know what to think anymore, Kylie. My mom's got me questioning everything. I was on the verge of tears. So, you're taking her side? You believe her over me? Jack stopped, looking lost. I don't know what I believe. I need some time to think. And with that, he left the room, leaving me alone, hurt, and confused. Linda's words had wormed their way into our marriage, casting a dark shadow over everything. I knew then that things between Jack and me were never going to be the same again. A few months after that disastrous dinner, I found out I was pregnant. You'd think this would be happy news, but with everything going on, it just added fuel to the fire. I remember telling Jack. We were in our kitchen, a place where we'd shared so many laughs before all this mess. Jack, I'm pregnant, I said, my voice trembling. He looked up, his expression a mix of shock and something else I couldn't quite place. Pregnant? Wow, are you sure? His reaction stung. Yes, I'm sure, Jack. We're going to have a baby. He came over and hugged me, but it felt forced. That's great, Kylie. Really great. But the doubt was there, lingering in his eyes. And it wasn't long before Linda got wind of the news. We were at her place, the usual Sunday visit that had become more tense than ever. As soon as we walked in, Linda was on us like a hawk. "So, I hear you're pregnant, Kylie," she said, her voice dripping with unspoken accusations. "Yeah, we're expecting," Jack replied, trying to sound upbeat. Linda raised an eyebrow. "Expecting, huh? And you're sure it's yours, Jack?" Jack's jaw clenched. "Mom, don't start this again." But Linda wasn't deterred. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking, Jack. Your wife's been very friendly with a lot of men." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Linda, are you seriously suggesting that I cheated on Jack? That this baby isn't his?" She shrugged. "I'm just concerned for my son. You can't blame a mother for that." Mike, who'd been quiet till then, spoke up. "Mom, this is crazy. You need to stop." Linda shot him a look. "You stay out of this, Mike. This is between Jack, Kylie, and me." The rest of the visit was unbearable. Linda kept dropping hints and making snide comments. It was like she was trying to turn Jack against me. When we got home, Jack was distant. He sat on the couch, staring at nothing. "Jack, talk to me, please," I pleaded, sitting next to him. He looked at me, his eyes filled with confusion and hurt. "Kylie, my mom's words, they're getting to me. I don't want to believe her, but..." "But what, Jack? You think I cheated on you? That I'm carrying someone else's baby?" My voice cracked with emotion. Jack sighed, running his hands through his hair. "I don't know what to think, Kylie. This is all just too much." I felt a tear roll down my cheek. This was supposed to be one of the happiest times in our lives, and instead, it was being poisoned by Linda's venom. That night, we went to bed in silence. The gap between us was growing, and I didn't know how to bridge it. All I knew was that I was carrying our child, and somehow, I had to find a way to protect our little family from falling apart. The day our son Lucas was born should have been the happiest day of our lives. But thanks to all the drama, it felt like walking on eggshells. We were in the hospital room, me exhausted and Jack looking like he didn't know whether to smile or frown. When the nurse handed Lucas to me, his tiny little face was just angelic, blonde hair and bright blue eyes. "He's beautiful, Kylie," Jack whispered, but I could see the wheels turning in his head. "Yeah, he is," I managed to say, trying to ignore the growing knot in my stomach. Later, when Linda and Mike came to visit, that's when things really hit the fan. Linda took one look at Lucas and her face said it all. "Well, isn't he a surprise? Blonde and blue-eyed?" Jack stiffened beside me. "Mom, what are you trying to say?" She just shrugged. "Nothing, just an observation." Mike, holding Lucas, gave me a sympathetic look. "He's perfect, Kylie." But Linda wouldn't let it go. "It's just interesting, is all. Kylie's dark-haired, you're dark-haired, and here we have a little blondie." I felt my face burning with anger. "Linda, genetics can be unpredictable. My cousin has blonde hair. It's not unheard of." She just hummed, non-committal, her eyes boring into mine. After they left, Jack sat by my side, Lucas asleep in his crib. He was quiet, too quiet. "Jack, please," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Don't let your mom get in your head." He looked at me, then at Lucas. "I know, Kylie. It's hard, you know? With everything she's been saying." I reached for his hand. "Jack, look at me. I've never lied to you. I've never betrayed you. He's your son." Jack nodded slowly. "I know, Kylie. I do. It's just my mom, she's got this way of getting under my skin." That night, back home, the tension was palpable. Jack held Lucas, looking down at him with a mix of love and something else, doubt, maybe. "Jack, we need to get past this," I said, my voice firm. We're a family now. We can't let your mom ruin this. He nodded, you're right, we can't. I'll talk to her. I'll set things straight. But even as he said it, I knew it wasn't going to be that easy. Linda had planted seeds of doubt, and they were growing, choking the life out of our relationship. Over the next few weeks, it was like walking on a tightrope. Every comment, every look, every gesture was loaded with unspoken questions and accusations. The tension in our home had reached a breaking point. It was a chilly evening, the kind that should have seen us cuddled up together. Instead, Jack paced the living room like a caged animal. Lucas was asleep, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing. Jack stopped suddenly, turning to face me. His eyes were hard, his voice even harder. Kylie, I can't take this anymore. We're doing a DNA test. For Lucas. I felt my blood run cold. A DNA test? Are you out of your mind, Jack? He was unyielding, his words like daggers. It's not just about you and me, Kylie. I want Mike to take the test too. That hit me like a ton of bricks. Mike? Your brother? You seriously think I'd? God, Jack. He didn't back down. You heard my mom. There are doubts, Kylie, and they're eating me alive. I was shaking with fury. So, your mom's delusional ideas are driving this? What happened to trusting your wife? Jack's voice was cold. This isn't just about trust. It's about certainty. I need to know for sure. Fighting back tears, I countered. And if I say no? What's your grand plan then, Jack? His response was chilling. If you refuse, you and Lucas can't stay. I need to sort this out, and I can't do that with you here. I stared at him, disbelief and anger warring within me. You'd kick out your own wife and son? Just like that? He wouldn't meet my gaze. That's the way it has to be, Kylie. I spent the night tossing and turning, anger and despair consuming me. The next morning, I confronted Jack again, hoping he'd come to his senses. Jack, we need to talk. You can't be serious about this, I pleaded, Lucas in my arms. Jack was stoic, distant. I've thought it over, Kylie. The test happens, or you leave. That's it. I couldn't hold back my tears. This is insane, Jack. You're choosing your mother's paranoia over your family. He remained unmoved. It's not about choosing sides. It's about finding the truth. I was aghast. And what about us, Jack? What about our marriage? Jack sighed, a hint of regret in his eyes. I don't know, Kylie. Right now, I just need answers. With a heavy heart, I packed our bags. Lucas cooed, oblivious to the heartache surrounding him. At my mom's place, I let it all out. He's making us take a DNA test, Mom. He's lost his mind. My mom wrapped her arms around me, her voice laced with anger. That boy's throwing away his family over some nonsense. You're better than this, Kylie. I sobbed into her shoulder. I don't even recognize him anymore, Mom. She held me tight. You're strong, Kylie. You'll get through this. We'll get through this together. Jack's doubts had not only torn our family apart but had also stripped away the love and trust that once bound us. I was now facing a future full of uncertainties, a single mother with a broken heart, trying to make sense of the wreckage. After days of agonizing, I finally agreed to Jack's demand for a DNA test. It felt like walking into a storm, but I had no choice. I was at my mom's place when I called Jack to tell him my decision. Jack, I'll do the damn test, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause on the other end. Okay. I'll arrange it. And Mike agreed to do it too. I clenched my phone tighter. Fine. Let's just get this over with. A week later, we got the call. The results were in. My heart was pounding as we all gathered at the clinic again. Linda, who had insisted on coming, looked smug, as if she'd already won. The nurse handed the envelope to Jack. His hands were shaking as he opened it. We all held our breath. Jack's eyes scanned the paper, then he looked up, his expression unreadable. I'm the father. Lucas is my son. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I told you, Jack. I told you. Linda's face was a picture of shock and disbelief. But, how? I was so sure. Mike snorted. Yeah, you were sure. Sure about ruining our family over your paranoia. Jack just sat there, the paper in his hand, looking lost. I don't know what to say. I was furious, tears streaming down my face. Say? You want to say something now? After you put us through hell? Jack reached out, but I pulled away. Don't, Jack. Just, don't. Mike stood up, his anger palpable. I can't believe you did this, Jack. You and Mom. You two deserve each other. Linda tried to say something, but Mike cut her off. No, Mom. You've done enough. I'm done with this. And with that, he walked out, leaving Jack and Linda sitting there, looking at the proof of their unfounded doubts. As for me, I just felt empty. The test had proven my innocence, but it had cost me my marriage, my trust in Jack. It had torn our family apart. I walked out of that clinic knowing that things would never be the same again. The day of reckoning had come. I decided it was time to bring everything out into the open. I invited Jack, his brother Mike, and their mother Linda to my mom's house for a final confrontation. The atmosphere was tense as they walked in. Thanks for coming, I started, trying to keep my voice steady. There's a lot we need to discuss. Linda, with her usual sour expression, sat down stiffly. Well, I'm here. Let's hear it then. Jack looked uneasy, shifting in his seat. Kylie, I've been thinking. Maybe we can just forget all this happened. Start over, you know? I couldn't help but scoff at his suggestion. Forget? Oh, Jack, you've got no idea. I reached under the table and slammed the divorce papers in front of him. He stared at them, dumbfounded. Divorce? Why, Kylie, I thought we could work through this. That's when I pulled out the final ace from my sleeve, a folder filled with photographs. I tossed it to him. This is why, Jack. As Jack rifled through the photos, his face drained of color. There he was, in each one, cozying up to another woman. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. What's this? Linda grabbed the photos, her eyes widening with disbelief. This doesn't prove anything. She's not the right woman for you anyway, Jack. I was seething now. Oh, it proves a lot, Linda. It shows Jack's hypocrisy. He accused me of cheating, and yet here he is, the real cheater. Mike, who had been silent, finally spoke up, his voice laced with disgust. I can't believe you, Jack. All this time, you were pointing fingers at Kylie, and you were the guilty one? Jack tried to interject. It's not what it looks like, Mike cut him off. Save it, Jack. I'm done with this. With you, with Mom's manipulations. I'm out. He stood up to leave, but Linda reached out. Michael, please. Mike shook off her hand. No, Mom. You and Jack have gone too far this time. With that, he left, leaving a palpable void in his wake. Linda, still clutching the photos, turned to Jack. You can do better than her, you'll see. Jack, still in shock, didn't respond. He just sat there, a picture of betrayal and guilt. I looked at them, my decision firm. You've both made your beds. Now you can lie in them. I'm done being part of this toxic mess. Linda tried to speak, but I raised my hand, stopping her. No, Linda. There's nothing left to say. You've lost a daughter-in-law and a son today. I hope it was worth it. As they left, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. I turned to my mom, who had been a silent pillar of strength throughout the ordeal. It's over, Mom. Just us now. She hugged me tightly. You did the right thing, Kylie. We're here for you, Always. After the dust settled, the divorce was final. The court granted me alimony and compensation for Jack's betrayal. It was a small victory in the grand scheme of things, but it felt like justice. One day, Linda showed up at my door, unannounced, her face a mix of desperation and guilt. "Kylie, I need to see Lucas. He's my grandson." I stood in the doorway, blocking her path. "Not a chance, Linda. After everything you've done? You think you have the right to see him?" She tried to push past me, but I stood firm. "I'm his grandmother, Kylie. You can't keep me from him." I was unmoved, my voice cold. "Watch me. You lost that right when you tore this family apart." Linda's face twisted with anger. "You're being unreasonable, Kylie. I'm still family." I scoffed. "Family? No, Linda, you're nothing to us now." She left, defeated and alone. Later, I heard that Mike had left the city, cutting ties with both Linda and Jack. He couldn't stand what our family had become, thanks to their actions. As for Jack, he tried to reach out a few times, but I shut him down. "You've got your mom to thank for this mess," I told him one day on the phone. "Don't bother calling again." Jack was left to deal with the wreckage of his choices, with only Linda for company. But even she was no comfort, as he blamed her for everything that had gone wrong. Life moved on. I focused on Lucas and my work, rebuilding our lives piece by piece. My mom was a constant support, helping me navigate single motherhood. One evening, while Lucas was asleep and I sat with a cup of tea, my mom sat beside me. "You did the right thing, Kylie. It wasn't easy, but it was right." I nodded. "It's just us now. But we're stronger for it." The betrayal, the lies, the heartache, it was all behind us now. Ahead was a future filled with hope and the promise of something better. Jack and Linda were part of a past best forgotten. This was our time, our chance to start anew. And I was ready to take it. Life at 40 was exactly as I had meticulously planned it, a successful career as a department head, a comfortable home, and a shiny car in the driveway. Love and romance? Those were chapters one had skipped, focusing instead on my spreadsheets and meetings. Until one unassuming evening at my friend Lisa's party, where my well-ordered world took an unexpected turn. "Anna, you need to get out more," Lisa had insisted over the phone. "It'll be good for you." I had reluctantly agreed, not really expecting much from the evening. As I arrived at the party, the atmosphere was buzzing with laughter and chatter. I felt out of place, awkwardly holding a glass of wine, scanning the room for a familiar face. That's when I noticed him. He was in the middle of a lively group, but somehow seemed separate from them. There was an ease about him that caught my attention. He walked over to me, a confident yet friendly smile on his face. "Hi, I'm Tom," he said, offering his hand. "I don't think we've met before." "I'm Anna," I replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, reassuring. "First time at one of Lisa's infamous parties?" he asked, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Is it that obvious?" I said, trying to match his light tone. "Just a lucky guess," Tom chuckled. "So, what brings you here tonight? Friend of the host?" "Yes, Lisa and I go way back. But parties aren't really my scene. I'm more the type to curl up with a good book at home," I admitted. A fellow book lover. What do you like to read?" Tom asked, leaning against the wall, completely engaged in our conversation. "Mysteries mostly. There's something about unraveling a puzzle that's relaxing after a day of work," I said, feeling a bit more at ease. "I get that. I'm more into biographies, though. Real-life stories have a certain appeal, don't you think?" Tom said. The conversation flowed effortlessly from there. We discussed everything from our favorite authors to our jobs. I learned he was a graphic designer, passionate about his work, and surprisingly, 5 years younger than me. His sense of humor was a breath of fresh air. As the night wore on, we somehow found ourselves tucked away in a quieter corner of the room, lost in conversation. It was uncanny how natural it felt to talk to him, as if we'd known each other for years rather than hours. When it was time to leave, Tom insisted on walking me to my car. "I hope I get to see you again, Anna," he said earnestly as we stood beside my car. "I think I'd like that," I found myself saying, surprised by my own willingness to step out of my comfort zone. "Good night, Tom." Driving home, my mind replayed our conversation, his laughter, the ease of the evening. It was unsettling yet exhilarating. For the first time in a long while, I felt a spark of something new, something unexpected. After that party, Tom and I started seeing each other more. It wasn't like anything I had experienced before. He was thoughtful in ways that caught me off guard. He'd surprise me with my favorite coffee at work or send me texts just to say he was thinking of me. One evening, he invited me over for dinner. I walked into his apartment to find he had cooked an entire meal. "I hope you're hungry," he said, grinning from ear to ear. "I'm impressed. I didn't know you could cook," I said, taking in the spread on the table. "There's a lot you don't know about me," he replied with a wink. "For instance, I make a mean lasagna." As we ate, he told me stories about his family, his dreams, his fears. It was intimate, real. After dinner, we settled on the couch, a comfortable silence enveloping us. "You know, Anna, I never thought I'd meet someone like you," Tom said, looking into my eyes. "Like me? How so?" I asked, feeling a warmth spread through me. "Someone who's not just about the surface stuff. You see the world differently. It's refreshing," he said, brushing a strand of hair from my face. I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled, feeling a flutter in my stomach. Weeks turned into months, and our relationship deepened. Tom was charming, not just to me but to everyone around him. He even won over my parents when I introduced him. My mom, who was usually hard to please, said, "He's a keeper, that one." But the real turning point came 6 months into our relationship. It was a regular evening. We were walking in the park after dinner. "Anna, I've been thinking," Tom started, sounding serious for once. "I don't want to spend another day without you. Marry me." His proposal caught me off guard. "Tom, are you serious? We've only been together for 6 months. I know it's fast. But when something feels right, why wait?" he argued, his eyes searching mine for an answer. I looked at him, this man who had unexpectedly become my world. "Yes," I found myself saying, "yes, I'll marry you." Married life started like something out of a storybook. Tom and I were in our own little world, wrapped up in the bliss that comes with being newlyweds. In those first few months, Tom was incredibly attentive. He'd surprise me with little notes hidden around the house, each one making my day a little brighter. One evening, I found a note on the bathroom mirror. "Meet me in the backyard," it read. Curious, I made my way outside to find Tom had set up a makeshift projector. "Movie night under the stars," he announced proudly. I couldn't help but laugh. "You really go all out, don't you?" "Only the best for my wife," he replied with a wink. As we cuddled under a blanket watching an old classic, I remember thinking I had never been this happy. But it wasn't just the grand gestures. It was the small things too. How he'd make coffee just the way I liked it, or how we'd cook together, dancing around the kitchen to some old tune. One day, as we were making dinner, I playfully splashed him with water. "Hey, what was that for?" he exclaimed, pretending to be offended. "Just keeping you on your toes," I shot back, laughing. He came over, a mock stern look on his face. "You're going to pay for that," he said, before breaking into a smile and pulling me into a hug. Life with Tom felt easy, like everything had fallen into place. Even when we disagreed, it was never anything serious. We had this rhythm, this understanding between us that felt natural. But as perfect as everything seemed, there were moments that gave me pause. Like when Tom casually suggested that we should have a joint bank account for convenience. I remember frowning slightly at the idea. Isn't it a bit soon for that? We're doing fine managing our finances separately. He shrugged, a carefree smile on his face. It's just easier this way, isn't it? One less thing to worry about. I hesitated but eventually agreed. After all, we were married now. Sharing a bank account seemed like a logical step in our partnership. The shift was subtle at first. After we merged our bank accounts, I noticed small discrepancies in our finances. Tom started spending more, often on things that seemed extravagant. One evening, I decided to bring it up. We were sitting in the living room, bills scattered on the coffee table. Tom, I've been noticing some large amounts coming out of our account lately. Fancy suits, high-end gadgets, it's a bit much, don't you think? Tom looked up from his phone, seemingly unfazed. Oh, that. Well, I need to look the part, don't I? You can't have your husband looking shabby. I frowned. But we need to be smart about our spending. We have a mortgage and other responsibilities. He waved his hand dismissively. Relax, Anna. We're doing fine. Don't be such a worrywart. That conversation left a sour taste in my mouth. Tom's attitude towards money was so different from mine. I was used to saving, planning for the future, while he seemed to live in the moment, unconcerned about tomorrow. As weeks passed, Tom's behavior started to change in other ways too. He seemed less interested in spending time with me, often opting to go out with his friends instead. Then came the day when Tom dropped another bombshell. He came home early from work, a buoyant smile on his face. Guess what? I've decided to go part-time at work. I'll be working only till noon, he announced cheerfully as he raided the fridge. I stared at him, dumbfounded. Part-time? Why? We haven't discussed this. He shrugged, grabbing a beer. I figured since you're doing so well with your job, I could take it easy. Plus, I want to focus on my hobbies, maybe hit the gym more. I felt a surge of frustration. Tom, we're a team. Decisions like this should be made together. He looked at me, his expression one of annoyance. Why are you making a big deal out of this? It's not like we can't afford it. The conversation escalated from there, ending with Tom storming out of the room. I sat there, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. It was around that time that I suggested maybe we should start thinking about having a child, hoping it would bring us closer. Tom's reaction, however, was far from what I expected. A child? Are you serious, Anna? I think you're a bit too old for that, he said bluntly, not even looking up from his phone. His words stung. I was taken aback by his insensitivity. Too old? That's a harsh thing to say, Tom. He shrugged. It's the truth. Besides, I'm not ready to be tied down with kids. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't the Tom I married. He used to be considerate, loving. Now, he was turning into someone I hardly recognized. As the days turned into weeks, the distance between us grew. The man I fell in love with was fading away, replaced by someone who seemed to care only about himself. I started to feel more like an ATM than a wife, a provider rather than a partner. The changes in Tom were becoming more pronounced, and it felt like our marriage was on a slippery slope. His part-time job meant he was home more, but not in the way I had hoped. He spent most of his time at the gym or hanging out with friends, leaving me to handle the household chores. One evening, I came home exhausted from work, only to find the house in a mess. Tom was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone. "You're home early," I commented, dropping my bag. He didn't look up. "Yeah." Gym was crowded. Decided to skip it. I sighed, looking around. "Tom, since you're home more, do you think you could help out with some of these chores?" He frowned, his tone defensive. "What? Now you want me to be a house husband? That's not my thing, Anna." I felt my patience wearing thin. It's not about being a house husband. It's about helping each other out. He shrugged, unmoved. I don't know, Anna. I have other things to do. I bit back a sharper retort, feeling a growing sense of frustration and loneliness. It was like talking to a wall. He just didn't get it, or he didn't care. I couldn't tell which was worse. The situation worsened when I suggested he could use his free time for something productive, like taking care of the house or cooking. Me? Cook? Come on, Anna, you know I'm no good in the kitchen. He laughed it off. But you could learn. It would be helpful, I pressed, hoping he'd see reason. He scoffed. I have better things to do with my time. I felt a surge of anger. Like what? Going to the gym and hanging out with your friends. He rolled his eyes. You just don't get it, do you? I need my space, Anna. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was not the partnership I had signed up for. I was working full-time, managing the house, and now, apparently, I was expected to be okay, with his complete lack of contribution. The final straw came when I found out about his demands at home. One evening, I came home late from a particularly grueling day at work. Hey, what's for dinner? Tom asked as soon as I walked in. I was taken aback. I just got home. I thought maybe you'd have something ready since you were home all day. He laughed, as if I had made a joke. Me, cook? Come on, Anna. That's your thing. I stood there, disbelief and anger swirling inside me. My thing? What about teamwork, Tom? What about supporting each other? He just shrugged, completely indifferent to my feelings. I went to bed that night feeling more alone than ever. The man I had married, the man I thought I knew, was becoming a stranger to me. Our conversations were now either superficial or arguments. The warmth and connection we once shared seemed like a distant memory. One afternoon, while doing a deep clean, I moved the bed to get to the dust underneath and spotted something glinting against the wall. Reaching down, my heart sank as I picked up an earring that certainly wasn't mine. The cold wave of realization hit me hard. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I turned the earring over in my fingers, a storm of questions and fears swirling in my mind. When Tom returned home later, I confronted him directly. Tom, I found this earring under our bed. It's not mine. Can you explain? He glanced at the earring with a nervous laugh. Where did that come from? Maybe it's from one of your friends. I knew none of my friends owned anything like this. No, Tom. My friends haven't been over in ages. And they don't wear this style. He gave a casual shrug, but I could tell he was uneasy. I don't know, Anna. Maybe it's yours and you forgot about it. I felt frustration building inside me. I know what my jewelry looks like, Tom. This isn't mine. There was a tense silence. Finally, Tom sighed and admitted, okay, it probably belongs to a friend of mine. A friend? My voice trembled with a mix of disbelief and hurt. Yeah, she must have dropped it when she was here, he said, avoiding my gaze. The room seemed to spin as I processed his words. When she was here, in our house, in our bedroom. He gave a half-hearted defense. It's not a big deal, Anna. It was just a visit. I was incensed. Just a visit? You brought another woman into our home, our bedroom? That's a big deal, Tom. He tried to downplay it, but I could see right through his act. You're overreacting, Anna. It was nothing. The conversation escalated from there, ending with Tom storming out and me left alone, feeling a deep sense of betrayal. That night, as I lay in bed, Tom's admission replayed in my mind. I realized that my marriage had hit a point of no return. I couldn't just brush this under the rug. I needed to know the extent of Tom's betrayal, to understand what I was dealing with. The next day, I picked up the phone and dialed an old friend. He was someone I had known for years, someone discreet and skilled in handling sensitive situations. Hey, it's Anna. I need a favor, something personal. I need to know what's really going on when I'm not around. Can you help? There was a brief pause on the other end. Of course, Anna. I know just how to handle this. Let's meet and discuss the details. Then came the incident that broke the camel's back. My father had an accident and needed a wheelchair. I found a state-of-the-art model that would give him some independence, but it was expensive. I didn't hesitate, though. This was my dad, and he deserved the best. I was discussing it on the phone with my mom when Tom walked in. "What's that about a wheelchair?" he asked, a curious look on his face. I hung up and turned to him. My dad had an accident. I'm buying him a modern wheelchair to help him get around. He raised his eyebrows. Sounds expensive. How much? I told him the amount, and his reaction was shocking. Are you crazy? That's a lot of money, Anna. I was taken aback. It's for my dad, Tom. He needs it. He scoffed. Your dad's old, Anna. Why waste so much money on a wheelchair? You should be saving that for us, for our future. I felt a surge of anger. It's my money, Tom. And it's for my dad. I'm not going to skimp on something he needs. Tom's face turned red. Your money? What about our money? You know what you should be buying instead? That motorcycle I've been looking at. That's a better investment than some old man's wheelchair. I couldn't believe my ears. A motorcycle? You think a motorcycle is more important than my injured father? He shrugged. Yeah, I do. I work hard. I deserve it. I shook my head in disbelief. You barely work, Tom. And even if you did, my father's needs come before your wants. He got in my face, his voice raised. You're being selfish, Anna. All you care about is your family. What about me? What about what I want? I stood my ground. This isn't about you, Tom. This is about my father needing help, and I'm going to give it to him, whether you like it or not. Tom laughed mockingly. You know what, Anna? I married you for your money. You're just an old, ugly woman who I thought would be easy to control. But I see now you're just a fool. If you don't buy me that motorcycle, I'll divorce you. And good luck getting married again at your age. Let's see who'd want you after me. I felt a surge of anger mixed with determination. Reaching into the drawer of the coffee table, I pulled out a folder and slammed it onto the table. These are pictures from a private detective, Tom. They show exactly what you've been up to when I'm not around, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. His smirk faltered as he flipped through the photos, his face turning pale. The images were undeniable proof of his infidelity, his betrayal laid bare for him to see. And this, I continued, pulling out another set of documents, is our divorce paperwork. I'm done, Tom. I'm done being disrespected, lied to, and used. He looked up from the photos, his earlier bravado gone. Anna, please, we can talk about this. I didn't mean those things I said. But it was too late. I had seen the truth behind the man I married, and there was no going back. I've made my decision, Tom. It's over, I said firmly. As he left the house that day, the folder and divorce papers in his hands, I felt a profound sense of relief mixed with sorrow. It was the end of a painful chapter in my life, but also the beginning of a new, albeit uncertain, journey. The divorce proceedings were nothing short of a roller coaster. Tom, in a desperate attempt to salvage what he could, demanded alimony, citing the stark difference between our salaries. His audacity knew no bounds, and the trial turned into a battleground of accusations and legal maneuvers. I sat in the courtroom, my lawyer by my side, clutching the folder that held all the evidence of Tom's infidelity and betrayal. As his demands for alimony echoed through the room, I felt a mix of disbelief and determination. This was the man I had loved, and now he was trying to exploit me one last time. When it was my turn, I presented everything: the photographs from the private detective, bank statements showing his extravagant spending, and testimonies about his lifestyle. The evidence was overwhelming, painting a clear picture of a man who had taken advantage of my trust and love for his own gain. The judge listened intently, flipping through the evidence, his expression unreadable. After what seemed like an eternity, he finally spoke. The court ruled in my favor. Tom's claims for alimony were dismissed, and the divorce was granted on my terms. I remember exhaling a breath I didn't realize I was holding, a weight lifting off my shoulders. It was over. The legal ties that bound me to Tom were severed, and I was free. In the aftermath of the trial, life slowly started to return to a new kind of normal. I focused on rebuilding myself, reconnecting with the parts of me that had been lost in the shadows of my marriage. One day, as I was having coffee with a friend, she mentioned Tom. "Have you heard about your ex? He's in deep trouble. Debt's piling up, and I heard he's even hiding from some angry husbands." I sipped my coffee, feeling a sense of closure. Really? Can't say I'm surprised. He made his bed, now he has to lie in it. The conversation moved on, but a part of me felt a sense of vindication. Tom's actions had finally caught up with him. It was a harsh reality, but one he had brought upon himself. As I walked home that day, the sun setting in the distance, I felt lighter. The chapter of my life that was Tom was closed, a bittersweet ending to a story that had started with so much promise.